But what I want everyone to know is, so the cameras, there's multiple cameras in the room that are recording this, and Joe and his amazing team are trying to help us get this documented, because tidbits of what's being said today will actually be put and produced into videos that will be part of the archive database that will be about the rise of women in the military. So public will have access to the stories and information that we're talking about, as well as documents and other types of information that we're going to be putting together to help people understand the timeline of the history of women and military service, as well as issues that are near and dear to our hearts as well as to our families and friends. So just realize there might be a camera pointed at you. When I'm like rubbing my face and stuff, you can be like, no, you're on camera. And I'm certain that we have the time and the people in the room, as well as many people joining us, that we can lay this out and use this as this founding portion of moving forward and having these discussions and having an opportunity to be in gorgeous facilities like Virginia Tech. Thank you, Dr. Dubinsky, and everybody here. So if you have a question, and we want people to participate in the discussion, there's a microphone that I think we have. We don't need it this minute, but we'll pass the microphone all around. So Mary Lowell, if you would help me with that, that would be greatly appreciated. And what I would like to just make sure that I'm watching my slides, I'm like, wow, my slides are going. Thank you, Joe. If you have something, raise your hand. And we just want to make sure that we get good audio, and the professional setup here is going to make sure that it is a phenomenal production. And I just thank you for your participation. So my name, I don't know everybody in the room, my name is Anne Marie Holterman, and I have the awesome opportunity to run and collaborate with everyone on an organization called Uniting Us. And we're happy to be here. And Virginia Tech has been amazing. Joe, are we going to go live? We are live. Surprise! That is awesome. And so, well, that wasn't a dry run. I mean, really, I was going to repeat a lot. So for those of you that are streaming, we're super happy that you're joining us today. And we have survey feedback. Let's see. I'm just trying. Joe, is my screen going to come up in here too, or?
Yeah, you ready for it?
Yes, sir. If you haven't already, click on this and do a quick pre-survey. It's helping us understand what areas of interest people have in the topic of the rise of women in the military, as well as issues that veterans and others have regarding either their time in service or health and welfare policy, implementation of those policies, and likewise. So please take a second to do that. And then after this session, we'll be releasing next week the post-survey. And that information is hugely important for us. So we are here today thanks to the support of Virginia Humanities. And that's really important to say, because as women, a woman veteran, I think a lot of times we don't have the ability to be seen. But Virginia Humanities looked at the proposal that Dr. Dubinsky and I worked on, and they were like, this is awesome. And we didn't talk to them about it ahead of time, so they know the value, and they made that investment, and we're grateful. We've had some conversations with NEH, the Endowment for the Humanities, at the national level. We hope that they carry well through the changes that are happening, and we will be submitting for a phase 2. Hopefully that grant will get picked up, and we'll be able to take what we're doing here, share it across the nation, and have even more women veterans and communities involved in our discussions. So Corps Cadets, we've spent a day and a half with them, and now we're here having our own session. And I have to tell you, if you have kids that are getting ready to go to college, Virginia Tech is pretty amazing. And the Corps of Cadets has a phenomenal program, and I'm told that if you check the box that you're going to participate in the Corps of Cadets, that they look at the whole student, not necessarily as heavily on the academics, but they want leaders. They want people that have a history of family commitment to the military. So I think that does that cover it, Jim?
It does, and there's also part of it is the civilian leadership component.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily required. You're not necessarily required to join the military.
Right.
To join the Corps.
And that's something that was new to me. So fantastic. So the first session that we have is with Dr. Alicia Christie and Penny Lee Deer, and both Army. So I thank you for being one of the largest services. And we have some other Army folks aligned in here as well. And I'm going to go from this slide to the big picture of the timeline for you to be able to talk from.
Perfect.
And what our intention is to identify topics and information that we need to gather the documentation for, that we can then have conversations in communities about policies and how they were not implemented, and issues that we dealt with, or how we can improve things moving forward. And that's our goal for all these sessions today, is to be able to leave, have a plan, know what the topics and what information we have to collect, and do that as a team, and then continue the conversation with solutions and ways to improve the system, both for military, for the young folks considering coming to the military, and for veterans. All right, so I hand it over to your capable hands.
Okay, in preparation for this activity, I gave myself some questions. I made a survey of sorts, and I just wanted to let you know we're going to be truncated here, so don't worry about if we're not getting to a bunch of, if we're not getting to that subject material or something that you really wanted to talk to. But Anne Marie has a copy, Jim has a copy, and I have a copy. So by all means, ask for them, and I gladly send them off. So after I made all these questions, I created a narrative, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to talk about today. So I am going to, my particular piece, I'm going to use this slide extensively. And what I wanted to mention was, I've learned so much. I'm naive, didn't know there's a lot. So the first one I'm going to talk about is on the timeline. It says 1951, and it's the Defense Advisory Committee of Women in Military Service. Anybody know what that is? Ever heard of it before? Well, I found the document from 2023, which is the latest one for the year, so they do a synopsis of what's going on. But again, I have a copy, and I believe I sent it to Anne Marie. If I didn't, I've got it. I can shoot it off to you. But what it is a list of 25 recommendations. So I thought it would be very cool to kind of compare what we come up with, or as a jumping off point. So I didn't know anything about it, and it's quite interesting reading. So I believe one of the reasons you asked me to come today was I'm actually I was part of the Women's Army Corps. I started in 1975, and it was disbanded in 1978. So the policies and implementations, that's, right in my bailiwick, so to speak, and I can honestly say it didn't follow that timeline. Some of them are totally different dates or never happened. And I can just, by all means, how are we going to know when you're going to handle that if somebody's, okay. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, when I joined, again, this is great news for me, it's right after the Vietnam War. And so there was no more draft. We had lost so many folks. People weren't enlisting. So there was a huge push for women veterans to join. 8,000 of us to join. They went from, we used to be at Fort McClellan, Alabama. They stood up the 17th and 18th Battalion at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We were one of the first companies to have a male drill sergeant to see if it was going to work or not work. So again, I had no idea. I joined the Army. I had no idea any of what I just said even happened till I read. So
So Penny Lee, like, it was different for each service, right?
Absolutely, right. And we have all kinds of services here, right. So that was a Women's Army Corps. The SPARs were the Coast Guard, Women's Air Force, and the Marines are a different situation. And we do have a couple that can address that. I just learned today that they are still segregated.
Yes.
And so yeah, every one of them, but for the most part, the transition for whatever it was an auxiliary corps, so you didn't get the full benefits. So as of when you went in 1978, then you merged, and I became a real soldier. So
So what we're trying to do is capture, from people's perspective,
absolutely.
their experiences. I think Liz has,
Yeah, I just want to.
one second, the microphone.
I want to say that while officially it was disbanded in 1978, I entered in 1977, and I was the second wave of women to go through co-ed as permanent full-time member. Well, not permanent full-time because that was 1948, but I was the second group of go through basic training co-ed at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, in January 1978. So it was actually pre the official disbanding, because there was another group that came before me in 1977. So it's kind of it's one of those things where like they started making it happen before they officially disbanded the WACs.
And so it was a process.
It was a process.
And so that's what we're trying to capture with the information. So like Penny Lee, you have the information that you came across. That will go into essentially a file folder, if we want to think about it this way. That's a topic about integration, women integrating into the different services and how they have or have not. And people can share their experiences with interviews. They can write about their stories. And then the policies and information that we collect, that will also be in that folder, like I'm using that, but that will be categorized so that people that are interested in talking about, as a community, integration, they will have a resource location on the Virginia Tech Library. And so that is it's a building tool for us, and by the end of the summer we'll release it, and then we'll continue as time goes on to add to it. So that's how we're facing, facing the challenge of documenting history using first person, whether it's interviews or sharing of their stories written, so that it's documented for all the services, and that no one kind of says, well, this is the timeline.
Anne Marie, I think there's one thing we want also to incorporate is that one of the key national decisions that were made when we went to the all-volunteer force. Because when we went to the all-volunteer force, that was almost a forcing function for the services. They had to fill the ranks. Okay, they weren't getting able to recruit enough men, and so they had to make some decisions. We need to bring in women. Okay, so I think we have to look at some of those other key big policy decisions that help drive some of this change, because those are important decisions also.
And I think that policy and having a copy of that specific policy as part of our documentation is really important, because even just the Corps of Cadets here, they said, when can I get access to this? Because I have to write papers all the time, and I would like to write about this. And I said, well, we're building it. End of summer is when it will be released, but it continues to be a growing archive of humanities information. So I agree, Mary Lowell. And sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. Did you want to add anything right now?
The only thing I wanted to add in my research, a document that I found helpful was historical policies affecting women's military and family roles, and that was published in the International Journal of Sociology and Social Policy. And in it is a table that I think is very informative, in that it has, by the era, the military role policies and the effects of those, the family policies and the effects of those. And one of the conclusions they came to, which is sort of intuitive, is women are needed during war times, and policies often develop that simultaneously encourage their service and regulate their family roles. And so, for instance, in 1971, there was an unofficial policy waiver for pregnancy. It wasn't until 1973 that there was an official policy, but part of that was because of lawsuits and public backlash and the need to have more women in the military. And so the reason it became a policy and not just an unofficial waiver was, despite the waiver, they lost 6% of the enlisted women. And so there was an incentive to develop policies to encourage enlistment and retention.
And that opened opportunities for women that previously, if you were pregnant, you had to leave the military. And so this type of documentation is critical because there are people that have been documenting it, but the firsthand stories of I went through that, I mean, Rear Admiral Ibach yesterday, she told me that she had to make her uniform because she was one of the first 2 women in the Navy to be pregnant once this policy, and she had to sew her own uniforms. And so I asked her to find it, and I said, we have some really good people with fabrics, and we're going to grade your sewing. But so that's what they were dealing with in 1973. And I'm sure many people wore the male's combat boots even into the 90s and early 2000s. They didn't have things made specifically, battle dress uniforms, things like that. They were, what do they call it, unisex, but really they were made for men.
These should be in museums.
Yes.
Yes.
Like the Military Women's Memorial has a museum,
Okay, here.
Library of Congress.
Right.
And it was different for Army Nurse Corps, was different.
Hold on 1 second. So
These should be in a museum. The Library
Is
of
that
Congress, the Military Women's Memorial, they all have museums that would be happy to accept them.
yes, thank you. That's a very valid point. Christina, you were gonna.
Uh,
Mary Lowe's coming with the microphone. So Mary Lowe is actually Mary Lowe Mayhew is actually a very accomplished athlete. And she didn't know that she was going to get some running in during this session.
Preparing me for Worlds.
And then we have the soccer player.
All right, 2 weeks she competes in Worlds, so yeah, fantastic. Go ahead, Christina.
Well, no, I was saying, and a lot of these timelines doesn't include like the Army Nurse Corps, which is what my
Right.
mom was in. She was in from 1969 to 1971, and 1971, when she got pregnant with my brother, she was actually given. That was the first time women were given the choice to stay in or not. But it came with a very large ADSO, so additional to service. So if she did choose to stay in 1971, I mean, it was adding a lot to her time.
Right.
But the Army Nurse Corps, to my knowledge and doing the research that I've done, it never disbanded after World War II. It wasn't, well, I mean, of course we went right into Korean War and Vietnam War, but it stayed. And she actually, from her service from 1969, 1971, she bought the house that they still live in 1975 with her VA housing benefit. And that was not available to all women because you weren't considered like as a whack or a wave as that. So Army nurses have always been kind of different. She was also in the first one in 1969. They actually, you had a choice if you wanted to, she called it shoot guns. So it wasn't part of the actual, curriculum, but they said, oh, if you want to, we'll take you out to the range type thing. Because they were just so busy. All nurses at that time were trained to go to Vietnam, and that was their mission.
Right.
So
Here's the challenge that we have, and everyone in this room has a lot of people in their networks and know organizations that have a lot of women veterans in them. We need to hear those stories and have them available because it really does influence both men and women and the Corps cadets. I had a Corps cadet come up to me today and he said, I thought women could serve unlimited. He's born after 9/11. He's young. He's like, I thought women always could serve in every service, and like it was a shock to him And so we need to capture that. And the different services, the different career fields within the services, it's really important. Alicia?
And I think there's one other key initiative that went on, which how I got kind of recruited into the Army, and that was a civilian acquired skills program. So they were really trying to target certain groups and education levels so they could bring in women with more experience. So I came into the service, enlisted, after college. Along with, and I wasn't the only one. And again, they were trying to recruit women with more civilian experience and real life experiences so they could begin to build the enlisted and officer ranks.
Could we verify that that mic is actually working? I'm not hearing it very well.
It's working.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me?
We just can't hear unless their mouth is closed.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
I highly recommend a book, The Women,
yes.
by Kristen Hanna. That's about, it's a vivid picture of women nurses in the Vietnam War.
Yep.
I mean, most of it's very well written.
Alicia, you're.
I'd just like to briefly make a comment, not necessarily directly about policy, but the need for some sort of infrastructure and resource in order to ensure adherence and implementation of policies. And I'll share a personal story. For example, in 1991, DOD had established a postpartum policy. And in 2016, they announced 12-week postpartum maternity leave policy. And as a major at Madigan Army Medical Center and a staff obstetrician gynecologist, I was an inpatient on triple antibiotics 2 days after my son was born. And my boss, the colonel, who volunteered to be my obstetrician for reasons you'll understand shortly, his nickname was Bottomfish, well deserved. My son was in the intermediate nursery. I was on triple antibiotics. I delivered 2 days before. He came to my hospital bed and said, I told the residents that you would cover my call because you're in the hospital anyway. So he was my senior rater. He was responsible for adherence to the policy. So I think there's a real need for service women who have external advocates who are out of their chain that can ensure that there is adherence when the person who violates the policy is in your rating chain.
We have a question over here first.
So the big changes that you see on this timeline from the 1970s, I've written about some of those, maybe of help. I've got a chapter on the pioneer women in the Corps of Cadets at Virginia Tech. They come in 1973.
Yes.
And you're capturing very much, this material is available to you, right? Special
I'm
collections.
so glad
and
you're here.
Special Collections and University Archives has a number of interviews that were conducted on the 25th anniversary of that. So we're talking 1998. And some of them, a number of these women had been in the military all along the way. The focus of the interviews is their experience in the Corps, but you pick up an awful lot of stuff about what came later. And it's really rich stuff. I'm thinking in terms of two things that can contribute. One is the institutional, and the other is the autobiographical, or
Right.
the first person, right? I'm looking at the timeline, and I would change it in one respect, right? 1975, women admittance into the military service academies. The 3 academies under the Department of Defense. The policy becomes part of the Appropriations Act passed in late 75, but that's for the incoming class of 76. So that's really when that begins. And the first 4-year graduates then are going to be 1980. That's part of what's happening across the 70s now. For what it's worth, if it helps, my chapter situates the VPI story, the Virginia Tech story, in a context that gets at those 3 military academies, plus Merchant Marine, plus Coast Guard, plus Norwich, plus North Georgia, plus Citadel, plus VMI, Texas A&M. Am I missing anybody? So there's a lot there, right, that helps line that stuff up and give some kind of idea of where the changes came from and how they affected opportunity for precisely the kinds of history that you're trying to reconstruct.
And actually, we realize that there are brilliant people that have been documenting things, and part of it is bringing that information forward. And so by you being here and helping us, you know, to the direction of what you've done here at Virginia Tech and what you've personally done, that gives us the ability to then even make the content that will be available to communities and understand women's journey through the years even more informed.
So two things. One, I'm happy to supply that chapter. And two, from wherever you are, don't have to be a tech, special collections, this stuff is online, right? And for many of the women, I say many, it's not like a huge number, but for many of the women, you get both a transcript and the audio. I don't know about the visual, but the audio certainly. And so you can tap into that online from
awesome.
anywhere.
Thank you,
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you.
All set? Okay, so what I was going to point out was we were talking about advocacy. So I spent 20 years in the military. There was no advocacy. You did what you were told, bottom line. So I never started advocating for myself until I became a veteran, and now I'm livid about it. So we talked extensively about pregnancy. When I first joined in 1975, you were not allowed to be married. Now, that's what I was told, but not according to the documentation. They flat out lied to me. Not that I wanted to be married, but at that time. So I was told that WACs were not allowed to be married. They weren't allowed to have children. If they happened to have children, you had to relinquish custody until you were no longer serving in the Women's Army Corps. Again, these are false information. So when I was 21 years old, the Women's Corps is done. It's after 1978, the official words. I was getting married. I had to go to the company commander for him to give me permission to get married as if he was my daddy. They had no right to do that, not according to what I've been reading. They just made up. They didn't get the memo.
Or they did, but they didn't.
They did
read
as they
it.
darn pleased. And this continued on. I actually had 2 children on active duty and became a sole parent. But so in 1979, I had my first child. And they said to me, well, you know, you can get out if you want to. I went, no, I'm staying in. So they made me change the contract. I had to sign a new contract saying that basically I'm liable for my dependents, and it was, you know, anyway, it was uncalled for now that I'm going through all this. They actually said the same thing in 1984, not that they were going to throw me out. They said, you know, you can get out if you want to. I said, what's wrong with you people? Don't you want me? So.
Alicia, did you have any other? And realize this topic of policies and implementation is huge. And so we've brought up a few. I know that other people have stories and experiences. And so we will make sure that there's a clear avenue for everyone to provide written, audio, video stories to help us populate the database and the archive. So don't think it's just limited to the things that we're talking about right now.
So the only other comment I wanted to make is I was struck in reading the document that I mentioned earlier, how oftentimes the policy changes were also associated with court cases and legislative change. So, for example, in I think it was the mid 70s, that servicewomen no longer had to prove that their spouse had financial dependence on them in order to receive housing pay and medical benefits that male service members did. So again, in the realm of advocacy, there's a critical role in terms of legislative advocacy.
Before we move on, are there other branches of service that anybody wants to speak to? Okay.
So first of all, just recall that
It's actually Title IX, that, Equal Educational Opportunity Act was enacted in 1972, or was passed in 1972, but didn't get enacted till 1975, which ended up making all the service academy, the service academies co-ed. So look into the history of Title IX. The other thing is, along the lines of Alicia, or Dr. Christie, what she was saying. So remember, we're all talking about being military veterans, right, or retirees. The problem was that, so my baby was born in Long Beach Memorial Hospital, a civilian place, because they didn't have a military hospital that, had maternity care. So my bill from the hospital went to Champus because the assumption was that I was not the active duty member. So remember that even though, we talk about how we have equal opportunity, my hospital bill was basically for the telephone and the TV so I could watch How to Bathe My Baby videos. And that $6 a day went to collections because I didn't pay it, because I thought my care was covered because I was an active duty member. And so I got a notice of default from Colorado saying that I was in arrears, and that could affect my credit score, because the assumption is that as women, we are the dependent and not the active duty member. So, I love being in the military. I loved being in the military, but the civilian sector, as I say, the grass is not necessarily greener, didn't recognize the fact that I was the active duty member.
Real quick about dependency. When I did get married and he ended up getting out of the military, so he became my dependent, I was responsible for his actions, and he wasn't necessarily the best citizen. So I was the one that would be in trouble when he went and got a DWI or whatever. It wasn't fair. So I decided I did not need that anymore. So I became a sole parent, which is a whole nother ball game when we talk about child care and the financial burden. And so the next thing I have is,
Melissa, did you have something
You
along
had
those?
asked about other branches.
Yes.
I was in the Marine Corps 99 to 03, and I remember having to ask permission to get married as well from my unit, especially because we were both going to be in the same unit. We had to get permission to get married. I had to get restationed from my one-year duty station because I wasn't allowed to be in Japan pregnant. So they shipped me back to the States, sent me to a unit with no running water, no electricity, literally porta-john and a water bowl, and ended up on bed rest. They did not care about the quality of the conditions you were set in because the Marine Corps didn't issue you kids. So
That's correct.
And then same thing, they told me to chit it out and you're going to Iraq 3 months after. I think there should be definite attention put on the protection of us. You know what I mean? Like once we have children, we should get the proper care that we need. It shouldn't just be thrown to the wolves.
Yeah, the Army said that if they wanted you to have children, they would have issued it.
Yeah, that's what they do.
But it wasn't any different in the civilian world.
The policy for pregnant females has changed. It is now 12 months before you're eligible to deploy after you give birth.
Okay, good.
All branches.
I'm sure that we'll have some examples where the policy might have been in place, but whether or not it was followed.
What they can
Right.
do in terms of, yeah.
Screenings, because anywhere you go to Iraq, you have to get medically screened. So they're looking at your medical record. They see you just had birth. You're not going to pass that screening. So even if the command tries to send you, and the recruiters aren't going to touch you. So there's barriers in place. So even if a command says, well, I can't afford to lose anybody else, you're going. You're not going to get cleared per policy now.
Or the doctor has you sign a waiver.
No.
Yeah.
No, I personally can attest to that. Not childcare, but, yeah, this is new.
a new change to the policy.
Good.
This is within the last few years. Okay, so
But the important thing to know is that policy exists. And so if someone in the military or a friend or a family member is dealing with this,
No,
that
you're
policy
right.
exists. And we need to help people know what policies exist so that then when someone is not implementing them correctly, it can be handled. Because like Alicia, you know, as you said, your supervisor, your rating officer was the one that put you in a incorrect position.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, I just gave to Anne Marie, the Air Force OB/GYN consultant to the Surgeon General provided the links for all the current pregnancy policies for all of DOD. So
We'll load this online.
we can put this online to have available.
But the problem is that as a staff corps officer, we frequently, as an OB/GYN doctor, we're frequently bullied by the unrestricted line. So I had a patient with high blood pressure. I had her at bed rest, right? The commanding officer, who was a lieutenant commander of the VP squadron, called me up and said, she's going to Naples, right? So I could have said, yes, sir, right? I was a lieutenant. But I said, you can replace her when you get to Naples, or you can replace her before she leaves. But you have to stand up as a physician to the to advocate for your patient, and it's a completely different situation than Dr. Christie had at Madigan. But for me, in a active duty, Naval Air Station Jacksonville, I had to, as a lieutenant, stand up to all these commanding officers that wanted to deploy their women at bed rest, either before they delivered or after.
But I think that also means that's a medical perspective, but I think from a leadership standpoint, women officers, male officers, I mean, even an enlisted, an E1, let's just say, if someone's trying to force, whether it's a man or woman that they're trying to force something on that there's a policy against, they need to be able to help advocate for your peers, for if even someone that's higher ranking than you, but that ability for people to speak up, it shouldn't always have to be doctors, because some issues are not medical issues, right? And so I think that's why, this information is very valuable, and that's what we're hoping people can send in and share, and then continue discussions along these lines.
And while I heard what you said, as a former enlisted person, most of the people in this room are officers. As a former enlisted person, there is zero chance that an E1, E2, E3, E4 is going to stand up to their command and say, you can't do that to Bob or Joni or myself or whomever. It sounds like a good idea, but it's an impossible reality, because we're just not going to do that, because we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get up on extra duty. We might even end up with a UCMJ charge for insubordination.
I understand that, but I also know that there are officers, and they might be just company grade officers, that they can go to and try to get help, or there's the chiefs and the senior enlisted. If we're not listening, the problem is if we're not listening as leaders, whether we're veterans or active duty, then we're failing, because these policies are great, but if they're not being implemented and they're not being offered to people, that's a huge disservice.
Well, Anne Marie, to me, I'm looking as a leader. Okay, I had pregnant people I had to deal with and family issues. If you're not taking care of your people and you're not being a leader and taking care of your people, you're failing as a leader. Your people are your most important resource, and they're your treasure. And if you don't view them as a national treasure and your most important resource as a leader, then you're failing as a leader. You need to go back and get re-educated. And I think when I had the discussions with the cadets this morning, I think that's one of the things that we emphasized in our table discussions, the importance of leadership and making sure you're listening, understanding your role as a leader, and you've got to take care of your people, period, end of statement. I think that's why I was so successful. And one of the stories I share, my platoon sergeant was a Vietnam veteran, swore he would never work for a woman. When I did my change of command, he came up to me and said, "You've changed my mind. I swore I would never work for a woman, but you changed my mind. You took care of your people." And again, to me, this is a leadership issue. So if we're making bad leaders, then we need to look at our leader development programs and go back to square one.
The reality is, though, there will always be bad leaders like bottom fish. And so there needs to be a resource. And as a major, as a board-certified attending physician, I didn't have the courage or the ability to stand up to that colonel. So I needed an external advocate who could ensure that he enforced those policies. And fortunately, at that point, I had the courage to go down to Labor and Delivery and say, with my IV pole, and say, "I don't care what he told you, I am not covering his call." And the residents responded, and none of us would be morally bankrupt enough to ask you to do it. So I think there needs to be, there needs to be a voice for the voiceless. There needs to be a defender for the vulnerable. And everybody doesn't have access to that. And so I think an important part of the policy piece is, where do you go if somebody is violating a policy?
These conversations have been so great 20 years ago. I was the only woman in an all-male motor pool, and I wish, especially after just coming off of 2 sexual assaults, I wish I had an advocate that was that for me. And maybe, I wish there was an advocate that would have stood up for the violations that happened against me and what we had to fight through. And I wish there was a solution to that we could come up with a solution to this.
And hopefully what we're doing today and what we've been doing this week is starting that, because we all have experiences. We were all in the military. We still serve, whether or not we wear the uniform or not. But those cadets that we have met with in the last day now have business cards and information, and they have someone that they can have as an advisor or a mentor that has nothing to do with the Corps, whatever military service they end up in. But the information that we're putting together, we need to provide that to not only veterans and communities, but to active duty. Young kids need to be aware of it, because when they go in the military, they need to know where their
daughter right now, 2 years she's been in, and she literally just had to report somebody for sexual harassment, not even last week.
Yeah.
It's definitely necessary.
Anne Marie, how's our time for our first session?
We're gonna, so we have 2 minutes. Annette, I think you have your hand up.
Well,
And we'll do 2 minutes and then we'll take a break, but you'll see as we move through these 3 different topic areas, policy and implementation is gonna be at the forefront of all of it, so.
As I'm listening to all of this, I'm getting madder and madder. I'm not part of the military, but this is a human issue. You know, childbirth is not a disease. Education is the answer, but every single person we've been talking about has been a son or a daughter. Every single person has been a child at some point. And every single woman sitting around this table, every single woman walking around this country has suffered some kind of discrimination in her profession. My son was born in 1980. I was a professor. I had no child maternity leave. There was none. Zip. Not one day. I mean, hello.
Thank you. Annette, this is, by the way, I think most people have met Annette Poland that are here, but for those people that are joining, Annette Poland, back in 2004, 2007 timeframe, she's an American portrait artist, phenomenal, brilliant woman in the arts world, National Portrait Gallery, and she documented with help. She had a team, she says, but she took on the task of over 1,300 service members that lost their lives in combat in the first years of post 9/11. She organized 250 people to do those 1,300 plus portraits of the fallen, and then had a way to display them because she had smartly the Women's Memorial and the beautiful gallery they have. They had over 5,000 people attend. The families got to be together. And so Annette, who has not served, recognized that back in the early 2000s, and she continues to mentor and help veterans today. And she's been here all week. And so if you don't know about her, we have her bio. But it's important that she's here. Sir, it's important that you're here. And we can do much better than what we're doing now. So thank you. Yes.
And excuse me, the United States is lagging so far behind so many other countries that recognize. In France, women are given 3 years, you know, and minors are paid for by the government till they reach 18. You get a supplement from the government until this is France.
So I think with this, do the two of you have any last ads that you would want to encourage people to leave and bring back with them in future discussions?
I guess I could add two things. We talk about these documents. We happen to have them. If you're anything like me, I like the hands-on, not waiting for everything to be compiled 2 or 3 years later. So we have those. Just ask for them.
Fair.
And the other thing that we were going to talk about, and we're not going to have time for, but the change in jobs. When I first went in, it was mainly admin or you were a nurse. For the first 10 years, I was a postal clerk, and then I switched to military intelligence and ended up in the Gulf War, working for the 7th Corps Commander. So life has changed.
Alicia?
And then you have people who are, just because they're female, get made admin jobs, even though that isn't their job, like your truck driver. Here, you know how to use a computer. Go ahead. None of the other men would put you for it.
No, I was just going to say, I found this a useful document, and I'll provide the information to Anne Marie, and you can see laid out the history of the policies that affected both women's military and family roles.
And so, Penny, to your point, I agree, waiting 2 years or whatever. And so we have actually already started accumulating the information that you all and others have provided. And so we can have access through like a Google Drive where people can go and download things and contribute to what we currently have. And it's going to be hard to manage. So when you're doing that, help us make sure that the titles on the documents that you load are clear so that we can then make sure it gets filed in the appropriate place. But yes, people need access to this information.
Sounds like she could use some volunteers.
There we go. Thank you.
you.
We'll take a 10-minute break for those of you that are all right, welcome back. So we are now going to talk about health and wellness, which we've already been talking about health and wellness, but from a slightly different angle. And we've got Liz Estabrooks, prior Army, but also you know her if you're were involved or are from Oregon as a woman veteran, and also she spent some very important time working at the Center for Women Veterans as the deputy for several years, and she's also the one that's guilty for I'm Not Invisible, which is a program she started. And so Liz, welcome today. And then we have Navy Captain Cynthia Macri, and she has a very interesting background. So in addition to the medical side, she also worked in the DEI side, diversity, and at a very high level. And so when we talk about health and wellness, you both have programs that you did individually as veterans, or like Cynthia will tell you about her glass torch work. which I'm very challenged at. But you know, incorporating not only getting the health we need as we age, as veterans, and the 3-generation family, I love to put that picture of them up, because it's like you have, you know, the grandmother that served in 1944 to 1947, all the way to Christina, and you served and medically retired in 2008, right? 2009, thank you. So we have this long window, and in just one family we can see what the health changes and needs are, and the VA needs to, and is trying to capture that. And so what's out there, what surveys are happening, how are those surveys and the research released, and what do we know as women veterans, and what's available for health conditions we should be monitoring, and if we have civilian providers, how they get that information. So that, I mean, that's a mouthful.
I'm
So
sorry,
I-
just listening.
So I hand it over to your capable hands.
So do you want to go first?
No, she's the adult in the room.
So, so I started working with women veterans in 2011, and so my specialty became women veterans, and I spent almost 30 years working in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault. So,
Your thing
is
needs
it,
to
is
be
it
on.
not? What's the matter?
Do you have it turned on?
Where's your,
Oh, maybe not.
unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay. So I spent 30 years working in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault. And so I became a subject matter expert on that. So military sexual trauma by association became my focus when I started working with women veterans. But it's not, sometimes when we talk about women veterans and health, we hone in on military sexual trauma. And I want to be clear about something. It's a misnomer to say, did you experience military sexual trauma? You didn't experience military sexual trauma. You experienced harassment, rape, or assault. Military sexual trauma is what you have now because of those experiences. When we ask people, did you experience military sexual trauma? Too often we get a no, because they see that as, I don't have a diagnosis. I don't have military sexual trauma. Military sexual trauma didn't happen to me. But if you say, did you experience harassment, rape, or assault? They'll say yes. So we have to start by changing our language, and that has to do with when we talk about health and women in general, women veterans. We have to say words that matter and that mean something, not to us, but to the people we're talking to. And last night, Mary was talking about person-centered care. And person-centered care is something that really has been missing from VA for a long time. If I had stopped going 20 years when I had my first really awful experience, and if I had stopped going in 2013 when I was assaulted, I wouldn't be advocating for it today, and I wouldn't be getting the good care I get today. So I think it's important that we recognize that while there are still failures with health care for women in the VA, and I'll give you an example, a woman, my doctor in Portland, she was talking about, because women have to so often be outsourced to the community, that it's difficult for doctors, and she was talking about pelvic, what's it called, the pelvic floor, what is it called?
Yeah, pelvic floor dysfunction.
Yes. So thank you to the doctors in the room. But she said because women have to be outsourced, it's difficult for us to work together as a team that we should. So there are some failures that still unfairly burden women veterans by using the VA, mammograms, like all kinds of stuff. So I think that when we talk about health and wellness and policy, we have to continue to push and talk about that. And it's not a matter of DEI, it's a matter of gendered care, making sure that we are getting the heart examinations, making sure that we're getting the tests that we need. If it takes a genetic test, whatever it takes. But there's also assessment disparities. So for instance, in TBI, there are a lot of women who have TBIs. But what a lot of people don't realize, including medical providers in the VA, is that the majority of TBIs that women experience come from a personal assault, domestic violence or sexual assault. And the majority of TBIs that men experience come from car accidents, being dumb, being in a combat situation. And so the initial assessment asks 4 questions that determine whether or not you go on to the next step of the assessment to determine might they have it, if so let's move forward. And so those questions on that initial assessment don't include, were you ever assaulted? Do you have this experience? So TBI, and we were talking about this earlier, when we think about things like TBI and erectile dysfunction versus FSAID, they say, they tell women that's part of your PTSD, that's part of your psychological problem. Whereas it's a medical condition, but with men, those are identified as medical conditions. So we can't stop focusing on the disparities of care. And those disparities can also happen in the civilian population in hospitals. I used to train doctors and medical providers and say, you have to start asking women if they served in the military. Because if they're coming into your private office, you need to know that they have this experience, and you should be screening everybody who comes into your office for this. So I think that's a real concern that I've been talking about for several years, is how do we make sure that women are getting equitable care that men are getting? It's a gender issue. When women are having separate assessments for their health conditions and being denied benefits for the same conditions. Women have historically been denied many things. They were denied military sexual trauma claims, and one of and I don't want to just focus on military sexual trauma, but I will say this when it comes to the disparity. It's a concern that veteran service officers too often only focus on PTSD. And I used to always say when I trained veteran service officers, rape is not sex. Let's be very clear about that. It's a violent act and a violent assault that leads to medical conditions, physical health medical conditions. So when veteran service officers are filing claims, when we're going to a veteran service officer and they talk about MST, they are only talking about the psychological aspects of it. So we advocating for ourselves and saying, yeah, but I also have these medical conditions that resulted from that assault. And part of that is advocating ourselves. Part of it is knowing the questions to ask and knowing the answers that we need to get to those questions. And so I think that is a good part of it. When we talk about denied benefits, combat exclusionary policies set women back terribly in their benefits because legally women weren't in combat. So women like the Lionesses were coming back and they were being denied benefits because they were told women aren't in combat, we can't give you combat related benefits. The VA and DOD are separate entities, but in many ways they operate in the same pipeline. And so the rules of the military can impact the rules that the VA follows. So all of these disparities, all of these health conditions and the environment, only now, we were just talking, only now is the VA a safe place to go. There are still unsafe areas, and all VAs are different. So the Portland VA is very different. The Washington, D.C. was my worst experience ever, and I've been to 5 different VAs, 6 now. And the sexual harassment and the poor care at the Washington, D.C. VA are apparent, especially if you're a woman. So I think we need to start acknowledging and not apologizing for it when we say, I'm getting different care than the men. Because our healthcare conditions, it's the equipment we wear in the military that can cause, men's Kevlar can cause huge bumps on your backside. They cause a lot of problems. I had flat feet because I was given men's boots and said, here's some extra socks. And that was 1978. And so when one of the messages I want to leave for women who are listening and their friends and family members is that wearing men's gear caused problems for women. And when you are thinking about what happened, what your experiences in the military were, think about things like that. Like, I knew a woman who she was carrying a 100-pound ammo belt on top of her ill-fitted men's Kevlar, and she has some permanent health conditions as a result of that. So my message to women is always make sure you have a good veteran service officer. Under any circumstance, do not try to file your own claims, even though the VA suggests that you do it. That's like having the fox guard the hen house. And so think about the conditions that existed for you and what led to any kind of condition you have now. If you have post-traumatic stress, if you have bad knees, if you have a bad elbow, and most importantly, you don't have to have been in uniform when these things happen. You just have to have been on active duty. So if you're riding your bike and you hit a pothole and it's after duty and you break your elbow and crack your skull, you can today apply for service-connected benefits for those health conditions that you have. But a lot of people think while I was in uniform. If it didn't happen then, it didn't happen. But remember, when you're in the military, it's 24/7, right? You're never off duty. And so again, when we talk about health disparities, it ranges from the time we joined until if it's 70 years later, whatever it is, you're never too old or too young to apply for your benefits, and it's never too late to advocate for yourself when you go to the VA, or if you're getting bad care, if you're being sexually harassed in the VA likes to put out these surveys, and when we talk about data and research, having been at the Center for Women Veterans, can tell you that we can't trust their numbers. When they say women and LGBTQ veterans have this high of a satisfaction rate, it's the way that they're asking the questions and the way they're interpreting the data. So for instance, they have their survey data might say this is the woman's, I'm sorry, this is how the women are satisfied and this is the men. But what they're doing is and I found this out from Veterans Experience Office when I was in DC, they literally only had 17 LGBTQ veterans that they surveyed. And they were comparing those numbers to 1,000 men. And they did that with their homelessness. They do it with everything. They don't weight their data. So it's really not trustworthy data. But if you're doing work with women veterans, you can contact, if they're still doing it, I don't know, the Center for Women Veterans. We developed a very solid, we used Booz Allen Hamilton consultants. There's a great survey out there. When I left, it was 18,000 women who had taken the survey, and that's a good number. And so anybody, if they're still doing it, can contact the Center for Women Veterans, because we made sure that it could be distributed by or analyzed by state, by era, by LGBTQ status, by many, many things. So if you're in one state and you want to know what's the information for this state, you can get those numbers from the Center for Women Veterans, if they're still doing it. So, but that's if you're an advocate for women veterans, if you're doing any of that work, contact them and say, hey, I'd like to get the survey data for my state, or for the whole United States, for whatever it might be, for the women's survey. And so I think that's about all that I really wanted to talk about at that real high level. And I'm going to let Cynthia give you some more. She's going to drill down a little bit more.
So that being said, the major issues that still face not only women veterans, but as a nation, right? There's still some major health issues. And remember that veterans in general and women in particular are a marginalized community. So we have been pushed to the margins because our numbers are low. So as an Asian American, I have always had my stats, I had my stats bunched in with other, right? Because the numbers are too small for statistical significance. So you're either white, you're either non-Hispanic white, you're Hispanic, or you're black, or you're other. So I've always been other, right? So, but women veterans in general are also considered a marginalized community. So what issues does the nation face? One is access to care, any care, right? Because we have a physician shortage. Why is there a physician shortage? Well, the cost of medical education is prohibitive. I did the scholarship route because I couldn't afford it, and medical school is $8,000 a year when I went to medical school in 1979. So, so access to care, and that also tells you who is becoming doctors. Doctors are people who can afford college and medical school in general, right? So what percentage of those doctors had the same experience as your troops, as your enlisted people, the whole base of the military, right? So without those shared experiences, you have to work on empathy as opposed to have lived it. So there's access to care, but it's also access to compatible care. And then there's access to specialty care. So when Dr. Christie and I were in the military, we bent over backwards to get our residents to rotate on internal medicine so that they could learn about blood pressure. They could learn about immunologic diseases or diseases that are the bailiwick, basically, of internal medicine doctors. There's no such comparison in the internal medicine training pipeline where they learn about obstetrical care or gynecologic care. And that's the people that are taking care of women in the VA. So there are some VAs, like Albany has one OBGYN, but she's a solo provider. She's a great person. Solo provider, which means she can't take vacation because there's nobody to back her up. So those are the types of things, and there's no maternity care in that hospital. So what ends up happening is that we as women veterans disproportionately receive fragmented care. And when any of you had a referral, you send your referral out for either mental health or I have physical therapy, I get 15 visits. That's it. Then all of a sudden my chronic osteoarthritis magically disappears after 15 visits. I go back to the VA, get another referral, and I'm referred to the next community care provider on the list. I have to go back and say, no, I want to see the same physical therapist, so I don't start over. And then I was told that I had to go to get a different modality. I had to get acupuncture before I could go back to the physical therapy, my same physical therapy. So this is not good care. It's called fragmented care. And so for OBGYN, that we need to have women deserve and have earned access to an OBGYN doctor. So what they've done now in the VA, which there's high satisfaction, just ask them, you get to see an internal medicine doctor who has done, get this, a 4-day boot camp. So I asked them the question, I said, so what did they learn in that boot camp? Like, can they place an IUD? Because that's a big deal for women in reproductive age group, right? Long-acting reversible contraception. They can't provide us an OB doctor, so maybe we should get contraception to prevent. But anyway, they don't do that, right? So they can talk to you about it, but they can't actually perform that. So now I see a person with women's health in the VA, but I still have to go to the outside to have any procedure performed. Now remember, in many states today, there are lots of procedures and lots of medications that you can't get. So it's geographic disparities as well in terms of what kind of care you can get. And the other thing that the VA does is that they pat themselves on the back about the fact that they have women's health navigators. Okay, these are not doctors. They're in general, nurse practitioners, PAs, et cetera. They have a lot of training, that's true, but they don't have the connections that we have. So as an OBGYN doctor in the DC area, I can call Inova Fairfax. Half the people there we trained, right? so we know these people. We know what board certification means. We have gone through the process. I know if you need pelvic floor if you have pelvic floor dysfunction, I know who to send you to. Not just the next generic OBGYN on the list of referrals in the community care network, right? And so that's another disparity. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is mental health. So we separate out the mind from the body, right? But in many cases, what's going on in your body is either a reflection of what's going on in your mind, or what's going on in your mind is a reflection of what's going on in your body, right? They're not disconnected. So we need to be able to access mental health care. We need to also be able to access gender-specific care or person-centered care. And and that's not exactly the way things are provided, because what we do in the DoD as well as in the military is we like to collect data that we can measure. It's too hard to think about to get data that we need, so we do what we can, and we used to call that butts in seats, right? I delivered this program to 2,700 people. Yay me, I've been successful. It doesn't matter what they learned or who else needs to hear it. What we tend to do is the metrics we collect tend to be those that we can easily measure, and that butts and seats is how many people were there in the room. So the last thing I'm going to say is what I've learned in the last 3 years. So I left the Navy in 2014, and like many people, like many veterans, the transition was not seamless, was not perfect. Now, if I wanted to be a GYN oncologist at GW, I could have applied for that job and, said, but I didn't want to do healthcare in the civilian sector because I'd been in the military my whole life, and I really liked having access to my OBGYN, right? So I didn't want to go do that. I also have arthritis, so I couldn't operate anymore. And it was hard, to transition. So I started volunteering because helping others is very good for your mental health. So I got involved with a lot of veteran programs. But it wasn't until a fellow veteran dragged me down to the glass place, and I learned how to do flame working. So I used to say to students and people, I used to say, I'm going to leave you with 5 things. Well, now I'm over 65, so I'm down to 2 things, because I can only remember 2 things. So these are the 2 things. One is, you are your first and most important physician. You. Why? Because I have 30 minutes to see you, and I'm lucky to have 30 minutes to see you, right? Because I'm a cancer specialist. Most people, primary care is 15, right? Who is taking care of you and your physical and mental health problems or conditions the other 23 and a half hours, 364 days of the year? You are. So what can you do? And the other thing is, remember that your food is medicine. And if you don't treat your food like medicine, your medicine will become your food, right? That's very true. And so what does that really mean? That means that we, as individuals, we have to actually think about what we are doing to improve our microenvironment, whether it's decreasing stress, sleeping more, meditating, doing things that make us happy, give us joy. So think of the word joy and think of the word gratitude, because that's kind of what we have to do in our tiny little corner of the world, is find those things that give you, that make you happy or give you joy. And you as a person, if you are happy, your environment or your people around you will also benefit from that. So to me, doing glass is something that's very meditative, and I will sit there with my torch blazing in front of me, especially if I'm near Anne Marie, and with my molten rod of glass. But remember, that glass will move the way it wants to, but I can control it by moving it out of the flame, putting back in the flame. If it cracks, I can heal it. So it's damaged or it's broken, but I can fix it by putting back in the heat, right? So we always think about you know, oh, I'm in the heat. It's like my feet are in the fire. Yeah, but that's what makes you stronger, right? And so the glass is a very good metaphor for survival and for thriving. So I'm gonna move, get off my soapbox and move back to the adult in the room.
I love Cynthia. So we had the pleasure of working together when I was at the center, and she joined the advisory committee, and we were just like, I see you. But I want to. She made me think of a few things. So when we talk about access to care, we tend to think, we still have, as veterans, we still tend to have sort of that military mindset, like we can't question. But I just want to make sure that all the women listening here and on the screen understand that you have the right to change doctors. You can say to the VA, I want a new doctor. And I think there's a 1 year, I think you can only do that once a year, but you can in fact change doctors. Also, a lot of women, in my work, I have found that all women experienced harassment, assault, and or rape in the military. And so many women don't want to have a male provider. They don't want to have a male mental health provider. They don't want to have a male physical health provider. And when I was at the center, I talked a lot about how that's a barrier to care. Because if you're assigned to a male doctor, you either may not go to your appointments, or you're not comfortable with your appointments, or whatever the case might be. I made it clear for years I wanted nothing to do with a male provider. And when I had my little snap in DC, and thank God for Anne Marie, have a battle buddy you can call, especially when you're in a mental health crisis, and Anne Marie was mine. And but I understood that it was a problem for me to see certain doctors. And so my psychologist, who was a wonderful woman, recommended that I go on some drugs for the stress and the depression and the anxiety. And so she couldn't get me those, but she sent me to a psychiatrist, and she said, oh, he's wonderful. I said, no, you know how I feel about men. And sure enough, when it was a phone interview, and he implied that when I was being harassed in the military, that I didn't do enough to stop it, and that I should have done better over the years. And I said, you are way outside your bounds. And I said this to him. I said, you have no right to talk to me this way, and I'm hanging up now. And I contacted my psychologist and complained. And she said, would you like to file a formal complaint? And I said, absolutely. And I said, and this man needs to stay clear of anyone who has had sexual harassment, assault, or rape in their history. He has no business talking to anybody who has been in that situation. I filed a formal complaint, but I never heard anything. But I think we need to make sure that it's clear in our records, I will only speak to a woman. I will only go to a woman. If that's what you want, stand your ground. You know, VA, too often, they have male providers in the women's health clinics. They offer only male providers, but push back on that. And make sure you let them know, I will not see a male provider. I won't see a male mental health provider. I won't see a male physical health provider, because they will back down, and they will say, okay. And they might say, it'll take a little longer for you to be seen, or you can be seen in the community. Okay, that's fine too. I'm okay with that. But I never want to sit in front of another man in my life who is a medical provider. And when I go to the community, I make sure it's the same. Now, I did cave on the neurologist. It's damn hard to find a woman neurologist. and he came highly recommended. So, and it's been a wonderful experience with him. So sometimes I do back off. I don't take a hard stance, but when it comes to mental health and physical health, other than my neurologist, I stand firm on that. And I think that women really need to hear that they can take that stand, and it's okay. And the VA will back down, and they will give you what you want. You're your own best physician. You're your own best advocate. And too often we aren't willing to advocate for ourselves.
We'll advocate for others.
Yeah.
We're very good
Yeah.
at advocating
It's
for
right.
others.
Yeah.
But so here's my question for you, both of you, is what can be done to improve the community care people that we get sent to? What can be done? You know, you have Lieutenant General Patty Horho, who went to 43rd Surgeon General of the Army. She sent, by the way, for people online, she was so generous to give us the Women's Valor Pin. But she went and she's out in the world now working with United Healthcare Group, started their federal Optum. And I'll tell you, I go to meetings quarterly with the CEO of United Healthcare Group's federal program. And they say, how can we do better?
Yeah.
How do we help these organizations that want to help and are maybe contractors to the VA? How do we help them better help women veterans?
It's the origin. So the problem is the gatekeepers in the VA. The civilian sector, you know, has providers that can provide that care, and you know, they are vetted to some extent through the community care program. But just for the record, the community care physicians sign a contract that says they will be satisfied with getting Medicare reimbursement. So it's not fee for service, it's Medicare reimbursement, which is it's between a half and maybe 2/3, if you're lucky, of what the fee for service is. So you're already getting people that either have a passion for serving veterans or they are, you know, settling for whatever reason for a permanent stream. It's on. Oh, yeah. For a income stream that's reliable, but it's half of what fee for service is, right? So that's the one thing about your community care care providers. I like to think it's because they're, you know, passionate about serving veterans, but it's probably not the case. And then, but the other thing about that is that who sends you out? So I would just want it for all women, you can go to www.acog, A-C-O-G, American College of OBGYN.org, acog.org. There's tons of information open to open to the public. Obviously, lots of it is behind the the paywall, but you can find some information on that. The problem is in the VA and many systems is that the person that's sending you out has not a clue about what you need. They see on the referral that you need, a neurologist, or you need a mental health professional. But they don't care what kind of mental health professional you get or what that person's experience is because they don't know. They're just somebody
Making an appointment.
Yeah, it's a navigator or something like that. And so even for the women's health, the navigators are not connected to the academic centers. They're not connected to, like, who are the good doctors in this? Yeah.
I was just going to ask that because as I personally have experienced, I'm having trouble with applying for like Social Security disability, having problems with unemployment, there's no resources that are either up to date or actually helpful for us to access these things. And I'm just wondering, is there any like national database for this or?
And I'll interject here. If you have any questions about anything, benefits or entitlements or anything, the best person for you to go to in most cases is a veteran service officer. They don't just file claims. They assist with many things. If you're struggling with generally not VA, but with benefits or with questions like Social Security or whatever. Most of them have that skill set that they can help you. They can say, here's the person, do you need help with housing? Here's the person in your community you can contact. Do you need help with Social Security? Here's the person. The veteran, and I prefer, and I have to be careful. I think like DAV and VFW and American Legion, they have some wonderful people. But the problem is that if their volunteers leave, you may lose whatever headway you've made on your claim. County Veteran Service Officers they have bosses, they're steady, and if they leave, there's somebody to step in and take their place, and your claim doesn't get lost. And those veteran service officers are required to be accredited and certified, and they have a certain amount of education they're required. But if it doesn't, if you always interview your veteran service officer. You don't have to sit with the first veteran service you come upon. You can say, have you ever handled a claim for TBI in women? Have you ever handled a claim that's about MST? Do you have the ability? And if you have, how many times have you been successful? So interview them, know that you don't have to go with them just because they're the person you're sitting in front of. You can say, you know what, I'm gonna move on and find a different veteran service officer. So I think that
There's more assistance on the civilian side of us.
unfortunately there's not. That's why I recommend the veteran service officers, because their job is to help veterans, and they're usually very good at it.
I'm not trying to make this about me.
No.
I know there's other veterans,
Right.
specifically women, that are in this situation, and we don't know where to go.
That's why I recommend the veteran service officer. They're civilians, but they may not all be veterans, but their number one focus, they have one job, and that's to help veterans. And I think that's the thing to do.
I don't have a question. I want to put in a plug for Smith Center for Healing in the Arts, which is if you're in a crisis, this isn't the place for you. Smith Center, it's smithcenter.org if you want to look this up. It was founded to provide help for cancer patients and their families. It's everything you've been talking about. You can find, we have meditation classes, we have yoga classes, we have art classes. There's a beautiful professional art gallery connected with it. It's located.
Which we'll be exhibiting in, Uniting Us will be exhibiting this fall, so send your art submissions in.
Nice. And that reminds me, I wanted to talk about apps. There's always an app for that. Yeah. And there are some very wonderful VA apps for veterans. There's some that are specific to women. There's some meditation apps. There's one that's specifically for MST. There are some for sleep. There's a huge number of apps. There are some that are for couples. And so go look at VA apps that are available to you, because there's some they have spent a lot of time developing these apps so that veterans have access, because sometimes it's nice to have, a meditation app, or to know about, like, there's some mental health app. So I think it's really, it should be a big part of what you're letting people.
Maybe we should talk to Lisa about.
Right, so Lisa Sims Booth is the executive director, and the Smith Center actually has worked with Walter Reed for years, and the COVID kind of messed that up. But they have online classes, and it's not just the Smith Center, right? It's organizations that are out there providing community support, resources for everyone, to include women veterans. And so some of the hang-ups that we have with the treatment or the care that we get when we're around other veterans, we won't maybe experience because we're dealing with the civilian population.
Right.
So I think that there is value, and Annette, I think, and to your point, Liz, we definitely need a way to identify good apps, organizations that are out there. I'd never heard of a county veteran service officer.
Oh, they're in 36 states have them.
I think who filed my claim.
Yeah.
So this information needs to get out.
Yeah.
And people need to provide us with information. You both started and you had examples of different care situations. And, you know, there's congresswomen and men and senator, they take the stories and they take them to the floor. But we have to provide them.
And and you know, the House Veterans Committee, I know this, I've sent a number of emails, they get back to you that Mark Takano and Julia Brownlee and such may not, but they have people, they have assistants, I don't know what their titles are, who will get back to you and they'll respond, and they might even say, let's set up a call. So I think making sure that you don't hesitate, and I can tell you this, that the Center for Women Veterans, you can go onto the VA website and you can send emails to the Center for Women Veterans or any office. But here's a magic phrase that will get them to respond to you immediately. My next step is to contact my elected official. VA hates that. It makes them crumble so quickly. Because what used to happen is a woman would send one of those emails to the White House hotline or to the Center for Women Veterans, and I would get an email that said, uh-oh, you need to contact them before they contact their elected official, because we don't want, or to say, I'm going to contact the media. Either of those will trigger immediate action from the VA. So
It's good information.
Our next question over here. We have a few people I know have questions. I'll make sure we get.
We have 3 minutes for this session, and then we can continue after the break.
Oh, I don't want to take okay. I had so many thoughts, but no, my name's Lauren. I actually work at the Washington, D.C. VA Medical Center. I'm on the executive leadership team for mental health, and I mostly work with our folks who have serious mental illness. I'm going to save time, but I just want to echo a lot of what I heard.
And she's a veteran.
Yes, Army veteran. Yep. I was a behavioral health officer, so I've done this my entire career, 13 at VA, 6 in the Army. So I just want to address some things. Every VA, one VA is one VA, and it's like a puzzle. Some of the VAs have got the puzzle perfect, and some VAs, they have 3/4 of it done. But we all have the same pieces, it's just they're not all connected the way that the really nice done puzzle is, okay? So I can only speak for my VA, and we have a patient advocacy service, so even if you call the White House, your congressperson, it'll trickle down to our patient advocates. And then your request is sent to your service line, and you'll get a new appointment within 7 days. You'll get your consults expedited. So, and there's a team of me in each service line that does that. So I don't want anyone to feel like dejected that people aren't looking at the concerns. But we also do put we used veteran-centered care for everything. So when someone wants an appointment and it's feasible within our staffing to get them an appointment with that provider, we will try, because some female veterans have experiences that they don't want a female provider, or some have had luck in the past with a different type of provider. Going into community care, I think that was brought up earlier. The biggest obstacle to community care is that we don't have, VA is technically saying, here, we're going to put you in the community. Your first authorization for mental health is going to be 12 months. But we have no control over that provider. And if that provider doesn't send in your notes, we don't know what you're doing out there. And so a lot of times we get veterans called that are frustrated. I'm frustrated for them, but then we find out that they were seeing someone 2 times a week for 2 hours at a clip, billing the VA and not sending notes in. So then when they come back to the VA and we want to reauthorize that person, and there's nothing to show that something actually clinically significantly happened, it's hard on our end to say, oh, please go back to this person. Typically we'll do another 6-month authorization, but if that behavior continues because the Optum providers are not credentialed to the degree that the VA people are, it's very challenging. And I'm just giving you that perspective because it's something that we're trying to protect evidence-based practices for certain diagnoses. That being said, I just wanted to offer that perspective on it. As myself, I'm a prosumer. A prosumer is someone who works in their hospital but also receives services there. So I've seen it on both ends. And I agree, walking into my work every day is stressful. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable as a woman to work there. But I have to keep that in the back of my mind and make sure that our mental health program services rendered also can see it from that perspective and offer an environment of care that is welcoming, and if not necessarily, like, we can't paint everything, but that the people know that, you know, our employees and our colleagues know you work here to serve that person. That's it. And so thank you. I just wanted to share that because you all hit on so many great topics up there.
I think
just-
Dr.
just
Christie
wanna
had a question,
I just
so I'm
want to
coming over
interject
to you
one
next.
thing first, and this is to Alicia. Community care is awful, and that's not a reflection on any. It's awful. It can take 3 months to get that referral and get it approved, and if you only have 12 appointments, you're finally starting to feel better with your chiropractor, and then it takes another 3 months for you to get that referral done. So if there's anything in policy, and I used to say this when I was at VA, the weakest link at the VA is community care. They act like you're asking them to do something special for you. They act like you're asking them to take the money out of their own personal pockets. They take forever. It's just an onerous, painful process that is a barrier to care. People just say, to hell with it, I'm not going to go.
Well, can I clarify, because I'm interpreting, so tell me if I'm incorrect, but you're saying that the process from your doctor at my doctor at the VA to do a referral for me has to go through the VA community care process. You're not saying community care on the outside, what that is, but just getting that bridge.
Just getting.
3 to 6 months to get the referral for chiropractor after I did 3 sessions with massage therapy and it was working and I finally could walk again. They yanked it, said, "Oh, sorry, now you got to try something else."
Which
So then you
is
got to go through another 6 months of application process.
Getting that whole thing
It's
done.
horrible.
I just wanted to provide information about 2 resources quickly, and to Dr. Macri's point, self-education and self-advocacy are critical. So there is an organization, Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation. They have an app, and in the drop-down menu, you can get assistance with benefits navigation, disability claim help, crisis support, and they also have a resource tool. So it's Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation, and they have an app. Another one is a podcast, She Wears the Boots. And they have information about both general medical issues and gender-specific care, such as care coordination services for pregnant and postpartum veterans. Now, under the new administration, they've ended this podcast, but they do have archived podcasts.
Excellent. Thank you.
So just, Maria,
That's fine.
let's let Maria ask her question, but then we're going to take a break. And so we'll be coming back at about 12:50, depending on how long Maria's question.
My question is, all my services are in the Bronx, New York area, and now since I live upstate, I have a nurse practitioner. That's my primary doctor. But I cannot go to Castle Point where it is next to me because I'm high risk. And basically they don't have an emergency room. So I have to go to the regular hospital outside Vassar Brothers and everything. And so I had to change my home attendant services, home care, up to upstate. In the Bronx, I had it for 7 years, and the same lady, and whenever she went on vacation, 2 other different ones came, but same people and everything. Upstate, only in 3.5 months that I have 8 home attendants come to my house and disappear afterwards. And another problem. Basically, what it is, they pay less in the upstate county, and they expect these young ladies and everything with $100 to survive. Another thing is, in the Bronx, they have this policy, though. Oh, I'm sorry. In the New York City, they had these policies where the home attendant organization and the coordinators told the home care person, if you go with a patient to an appointment and pass your time, you just let us know, but you cannot leave the patient in the hospital alone. You have to bring them back home. Upstate, they desperate to punch out at 3 o'clock because they won't pay them.
And this is like a problem with
yes,
different services and programming
and
in just the
everybody is
same
different,
state.
and so I tell them, you're going to leave me when I have seizures and everything, and sometimes I cannot find my way home. So now in the Bronx, they made something for me. They saying I just down one for my appointments, and they send an Uber upstate. I get an Uber.
Oh, good.
It takes me straight to the Bronx, and then I have until 5 o'clock in the morning to just press, and the Uber will bring me back home. That way, that in case I don't have a home attendant or somebody with me, there will be I will be there without driving. But it's unfair that these systems don't come across every state. She's here. When I went to Pennsylvania, I talked to her, explained to her about getting home care, and she got it and everything. Now she moved to Ohio.
She has to start over.
Ohio doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And she needs it. So how could she work that out? Because I know when she gets sick, she gets sick. Because I know her for years. And it's a shame that the system doesn't go from one state to another state. Why don't the VA hospital mirror each other in services and how they manage it? Because then everybody will get the same services. Everybody will know from here to here. They will know how to treat the patients, especially the females that are invisible. Unless you make a big stink about it, you will not be seen.
And hopefully programs like this can help it be more
Yes.
visible.
Yeah.
So the very last part of this session, and then we're going to go to break, is intentionally the I Am Not Invisible pictures are on this slide. And while that went to the VA for a little while, and then it kind of became less of a focus for a VA, Liz, you will continue it.
Yes, we are, the Center for Women Veterans will most likely be taking those pictures down. And so Jean and I are working on getting them all transferred to a Flickr account so that they will have a non-VA home, if you will, so that it'll last, they'll be there forever. You'll be able to go in and download them, and hopefully, Jean will still be able, if you contact him, he may, whether
We're
he's
working on
allowed.
it.
Yeah.
So Gene Russell is an Army veteran. He works at the VA, DC VA, but actually at the secretary level as a professional photographer.
And he took most of the I Am Not Invisible.
Right, 4,000 or so, but that number continues to grow. So Gene was going to be here with us today. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here, but if you haven't had an I Am Not Invisible picture taken, I will tell you the experience is absolutely phenomenal, and we continue, Uniting Us and others are committing to helping Jean and Liz make sure that it continues. And because they tell a lot with just one snapshot.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
we're going to take a break. We'll come back at 12:50 and we'll talk about culture and kind of wrap things up, and then we'll talk about how to get information shared with everyone else and people online. So thanks. See you in 10. I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
We just want to get those of you that are in here, if you want to move to the table, would be wonderful. And
Yeah, you guys come up to the table, please. Actually, my mic is not on.
okay,
Thank you. please join us at the table. So welcome back, and appreciate people's flexibility that are viewing this streaming. And as we change people and people are heading out to travel back to their states, we had 12 veterans from 12 states join us, which has been fantastic. But when we're talking about airfare, air flights, and we're in Blacksburg, Virginia, which is beautiful, but it's also not easy to get to. And so we want to make sure people get to the airports and what they need to do. So this last session, and we'll wrap everything up at the end, is culture. And it's my honor. I put my name on this one, but really it's Mary Lowell Mayhew that is the one that is leading this session. And really, it takes information from the other two sections that we've talked about, and then talks about the people. Ultimately, what we're doing is about the people. What you're seeing in the video, or in the picture, these are women, veterans, all ages, all services, starting with service in 1944, and some that just have gotten off of active duty. And as we grow this, and as it's become apparent to me today, there's a need to not just have it be information and conversations with veterans. Active duty needs to be part of this. And that's to help them navigate, them being active duty, men and women, navigate, know what policies are, and if the policies are not being implemented properly at their specific location, that they can be leaders to help it be resolved before someone actually becomes a veteran. So with that, I hand it to you, Mary.
Well, thank you. I'm going to enjoy this discussion because when I think about culture, one of my first things that comes to mind is, I don't remember the Virginia Slims commercial, "We've come a long way, baby." And I think it's good to see we've come a long way, because when I entered the service around 1979, 1980, so few positions were open to women, and it really restricted my options and my ability to do certain things. Whoops, I lost my mic. Sat on it. Let me go ahead and take care of a technical problem here, and then we'll go. I'll go ahead and start over. So one of the things I want to open with is when I think about, unfortunately, a cigarette commercial, Virginia Slims commercial, I'd like to open with "We've come a long way, baby."
Right.
And I think that's kind of the good news. And I look at when I entered the service in 1979, 1980 timeframe, there were so few positions open to women. And other than the nursing corps, before that was really the only avenue to success, to make rank. And that's changed now, but it took a long time, almost 40 years, or more than, almost 40 years, from 1980 around that time frame to 2016 when we finally opened all those positions to women. And that's the year, of course, I retired because I ran a runway. I think that's the good news. We've broken down a lot of barriers and we've done them, but it's taken time and it's been painful. And there's a lot of women in this room, and a lot of women that came behind us and are still with us that helped shape some of that, and that's the good news. But the challenge is we have a lot more to do. And when I hear some of the challenges we're facing, the big question is, how do we going forward build better leaders and build better service members? When I hear that we're still having challenges with access to care, sexual assault, what are we missing? Okay, those things shouldn't be happening. We should be making sure when our service members come in, they understand and they adhere to those service level values. Sexual assault's not permitted, but it's still happening. Why are these things still happening? Why aren't we doing a better job to care? Are we developing our leaders and encouraging our leaders and our service members to advocate for themselves and to ask the hard questions? And I look at our cadet programs and our service level academy programs, and I think this is where I'm grateful for being here today and having the time with those young leaders, because they asked some good questions. And I think that's one of the things when we talk about influence.
Right.
They need their influencers. I asked interesting questions of them today. How do you get your information? What influences you? And I was kind of surprised that a lot of them, social media.
but it's what was it? Podcast and Instagram.
Instagram was the big one.
And I thought, wow, nobody's really listening to the big news the big news podcast. Nobody is really getting both sides of the story. Out of the probably 15 young men and women I spoke to, probably only one of them indicated, it was a he, that he really tried to look for both sides of the story and really tried to dig deep and looked at vetted news sources.
Right, vetted.
Yes, and not Instagram, where people can say anything. And I'm worried about going forward and the impact of cultural changes and cultural practices that can push us back if we're not getting the right influences out there. And I think that's something we're going to need to be paying attention to going forward, looking at where those influences are. The other thing that was kind of interesting, Anne-Marie, and when I talked to so many of the young men and women why they decided to join the service, a lot of them came from, I'm using this term very broadly, warrior families. Families where there are already service members influencing them. And going forward, are we bringing enough people outside that warrior family to help making sure that we have a diverse population with different ideas and different viewpoints?
And not the traditional mindsets.
And not the traditional mindsets. I read a book some time ago about the importance of diversity and the importance of having diverse teams. And the success of our nation has been about diversity, bringing in those diverse ideas, bringing in diverse thoughts. And I'm hoping we don't lose that going forward, because I think some of the greatest leaders have been open to other ideas, bringing in the quote-unquote disruptors, and I was always one of them.
Well, you demonstrated that with the microphone. I'm like, yeah, that's usually me, by the way, so thank you.
Well, you know, one time, one of my funny stories, I was I was doing an assignment in the Middle East as a special envoy to look at some of the challenges our service members, specifically the Guard and Reserve, were having integrating into the active force when they were deploying into theater, because we had changed the way we were doing our deployments and then pulling in a lot more Guard and Reserve to enhance our brigades that were going into the war fight. And there were a lot of issues with the integration. And I remember General Blum came in to see how I was doing and goes, "Are you stirring the pot, Mayhew?" I had to affirm him that I certainly was. But I think it's important to do that, and making sure that when we think about that, I felt empowered at that moment because somebody had my back.
Right.
And I think when we're looking at developing our young leaders, making sure they have that advocate to cover their back. And that was not the first time General Blum covered my back.
Right.
Okay.
And there's other leaders, right?
There's other leaders
that
out
we've
there.
had and experienced. I may have been a disruptor as well.
That's no surprise.
I know, it's really surprising. One thing I want, you know, the people that are listening in and that will have a chance to hear this didn't have the opportunity necessarily to hear the discussion that we had with the Corps of Cadets, Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets, 1,300 students yesterday, a beautiful auditorium, Burrs Hall, and we imagine this, we ran out of time. There were a lot more questions, which we were able to cover a lot of those at breakfast this morning with the Corps, but 3 questions, 3 different demographics of people that stood up and asked questions, and they all were very thoughtful and careful on how they worded questions, not to offend anyone. And what I found most interesting is the question about DEI that the last gentleman brought up, and how to support it basically without getting into trouble, right? Like, we know that a blended force and a diverse group of people have, from all walks of life, bring in ideas and thoughts and problem-solving capability that we wouldn't have if it was one demographic.
Yes.
And so I think an issue that we have with culture is you have culture that exists, and then you have what the organization wants as a culture, and then you have what the younger generations are bringing in, and how we kind of sort through all that and say, okay, here's a path forward.
Yes.
But they're asking the question.
I know, they are.
And
tha-
he's a
that's-
junior.
And I think that's a good question. And I think part of it is, meeting people and organizations where they're at. I think that's so important, understanding where you can influence and making sure that adheres to the service level values. Because we're getting rid of some of the programs, some DEI, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be supporting the service values of, and respect.
Right.
Okay, and honoring each other and respecting each other. In some ways, if we had an ideal situation, we wouldn't have to have advocacy for women because we would be already equal. We wouldn't have to demand some of the things we're doing, or we're demanding, or we wouldn't have some of these things in an ideal world, but we're not there.
But you know what? We're making progress,
We are
which is
making
what you
progress.
said.
Yes,
So Virginia Humanities read this proposal that actually Army veteran, retired Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Jim Dubinsky, I did it. They picked this project, and Virginia Tech, actually multiple departments have been involved. We've worked with the students, we've met with the Corps and working with them now moving forward. And it's partially funded.
Yes.
By a state. And by the women veterans, and we have male veterans in the room with us. We've
Which
had
is
men
important.
and women all week. But here's the question that I have for them. So Ryan Henley, thank you for being here from the DCVA. And I'm sorry, sir, I don't want to say. Yes.
Dave.
So can you hand the microphone, Joe, to any one of those three gentlemen, because Ryan, if you could share with me, you're a Marine veteran. You actually are very engaged with younger pre-service people, young future leaders, and also with veterans through the programming that you've done. And so I would love to hear what your thought is on how we can continue to make progress, regardless of some words or what current administration or what's happening politically or whatever in our nation, but what we can do to maintain.
Build better leaders.
Yeah, build better leaders. And for veterans to be able to support that.
Thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you for inviting me to this event. This has been amazing. I think it really starts with events like this. When you told me about it a few weeks ago, I thought it just sounded just incredible. I haven't, I think intergenerational learning experiences like this, where veterans can talk to future service members, current service members, I think that's really valuable. I was telling some of the cadets this morning that when I got out of the Marine Corps in 2013, I did TAPS. TAPS is fine, but I still didn't think that a lot of the resources that I learned about were for me. I did 5 days of classes, an overview of the benefits, but I didn't think a lot of that applied to me as a veteran. So when I got out, I had about 5 years where I really struggled with various things, and just that it never occurred to me to use any resources that I had available the entire time. And now I work at VA, and I've previously worked in a VA PTSD counseling program called the Vet Center. Lauren Emerson also worked in that program. Chris Davis worked there as well. So working in a resource program like that at VA, a big part of it for me, so that program works with veterans as well as active duty. So I did community engagement for the program, and I'd be in the community talking to current service members in their early 20s. And I would always tell them, I know the military culture is changing and has changed a lot since I was in, but if there's still any stigma against accessing resources, particularly mental health resources, please, I tell people, please use the resources that are there. Don't be afraid to use resources, and just if you need help with something, don't be afraid to get help or ask for help. There's a lot of vet centers, for example, are designed to be very confidential. So you can, you know, an active duty service member can go to a vet center, get counseling, and that the clinical reporting system they use is separate from the main one VA uses. It's self-contained, and it doesn't report back to DoD. So it's meant to be a protected space for people to access a resource. So I always tell people, and I was telling some cadets this morning, please use resources that are available. Please get help. And I think events like this one, where cadets can talk to veterans like Colonel Mayhew. I mean, I think just the transmission of knowledge like this is really important, because there's all things we can all look back on our careers in the military and think like, oh, this could have been different, or I wish this had been different, or I wish I'd known to do this or taken this opportunity. And in fact, often, as we've been discussing in this conference, that there were limited opportunities, particularly for women veterans. So, I think it's really great just to educate future leaders like we're doing here. So.
And then if you can pass the microphone, sorry, to Dr. Dubinsky.
Oh, no.
I would certainly
All right,
echo everything that Ryan has said. And, there is that stigma. And even I work at Walter Reed as a social worker, particularly officers, and they'll meet me in internal medicine clinic, and then I'll do a quick assessment, and then I often refer them to things like the vet center, because there is, especially in higher leadership, there is still that little stigma. And, when somebody active duty walks in, you have to report back to chain of command, regardless who that person is.
Right.
And I think it's giving them that little privacy to say, hey, go to a vet center or use community resources that they're able to obtain. But and the big thing, they're like, what is a vet center? Am I allowed to go to it? And I go, yeah. It's for active duty. Congress authorized it, blah, blah. And they're able, and they often come back and are like, thank you. And then we also see, the majority of my patients are retired female active duty members that are now veterans that didn't address mental health or issues because they were afraid to. So I'm glad that we were able at Walter Reed to give them that resource.
Yeah, it's fabulous, and I wasn't aware of them until I met Ryan 5 or 6 years ago. So it is a phenomenal resource, and I'm so grateful that you were able to come down and spend time with us. So Dr. Dubinsky.
I was just going to step in
Lauren,
and say something really quickly.
Yes.
Chris sold himself short a little bit in that, because at the vet center there were zero at that point in time in Silver Spring. There were no female clinicians, and I think historically the approach has always been have a female clinician be the MST provider. And what's interesting and unique about the vet center services is that we do not have the same eligibility criteria as big VA. So we would have service members come through the door that served, maybe they didn't get through basic training, maybe they didn't get through AIT, but they have military sexual trauma. And so they can receive services there. And then simultaneously, a point I wanted to mention earlier is that Chris and our other colleagues would not help with a claim, but help support a person submitting an MST, a claim related to MST, because that process is gut-wrenching. And so you're working with someone, the VSO, and then they're going to say, you should write an impact statement. Well, you don't want anyone doing that on their own without mental health support.
Right.
So Chris did that, and our other colleagues at the vet center did too. So he was selling himself short here.
Well, that's a valid point, and one thing that I think we need to recognize culturally is when we do events, we have healthcare providers with us, which actually you heard a couple of the doctors talking today. And we have a lot of veterans that are involved in mentoring and helping both active duty and veterans that have been trained and gone through specialty training and support so that they can help people go to a writing workshop and write safely, right? And when they leave, they practice how to come out of the deep, thought process that they were in. But it's critical.
the whole healing arts.
The whole
too.
healing arts.
Yes, which I think are so important to help people tell their stories, whether it's through writing, poetry, or pottery, or glass,
or dance, or theater,
dance,
yeah.
drawing. And I think that is such an underutilized source for people to help with the healing process and then maintaining resiliency. And I know this year at our symposium we talked about the difference of the therapy, with the healing process, and then places like the Smith Center that help you retain that wellness and
Right.
retain that health.
And a place to go.
And a place to go.
Right.
Yes, to maintain the health.
And so Dr. Dubinsky has been here at Virginia Tech since, did you say 1998?
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen it and you've built programs here, but you're part of this initiative and we're sharing it with others, hopefully sooner rather than later, not 2 years, 3 years like Penny said. How do you see this, and especially culturally, because you taught at West Point when you were in the Army. You're here now and you've been a civilian. You have 4 grown kids. Please share with us.
Well, but there's something I want you to touch on when you're sharing your thoughts, because I'm going to pull Ryan's intergenerational thing. And something that you do here that I think is important, because we've talked about diversity and bring in different ideas and different thoughts. One of the big things is that as veterans in the military, it's just not the military that takes care of us. It's all of the communities, all those other agencies that have to work together. And they have a very special program, I think, is really an important model. I really want to pull the threads on that a little bit and I'd like to, when you're talking about some of this, I'd like to talk about that program a little bit.
Okay, I'll do my best to try to address. First, I feel privileged to be among all of my fellow veterans and to learn from them. One of the most important things I can say that I've learned in my long career is to listen and seek out stories from a wide range of audiences. And so one of the things that I noticed here, although we could still do better, we had a wide range of people who were involved, and that is women from all different branches, women from different generations, and women who really, the medical corps side of things and the combat arms side of things. We had our Marines and therefore our enlisted as well, right, and our officers. And we need to do more to gather the voices of the enlisted soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines because they form 2/3, 3/4 of the population, if not more. I'll just give you I guess just to try to go to Colonel Mayhew, Mary Lowe's question. So when I arrived here, I was still in the reserves, but I was trying to build a program, and I was trying to teach my students how to live out the motto of the university, which is ad prosum. And it was a writing program, and I said the best way for them to do that would be to engage with the community. And so I put them in, I connected with nonprofits all across the community from '98 to 2007, and I probably had between 35 and 40 different partners, and my students wrote grants, or they built websites, or they wrote annual reports, or they did all that material. And I was also on the board, I got on the board of a couple of nonprofits, and I was involved in something called the Third Thursday Society, which was run by, again, so powerful yesterday listening to Dr. McCree, but Andy Morikawa, whose parents had been interned during the World War II, and he was the director of the Community Foundation, so to get to the community. And he would hold these meetings every third Thursday of all the community leaders, and I would attend, and I'd be one or maybe 2 at Virginia Tech people there. The shooting tragedy happened on 4/16/2007, and it just so happened that I was in the middle of a special project of a task force to help the university figure out what student engagement was. I guess because I had been doing all this work with the community. And so our recommendation then became very important. It was to create a center. And for engagement. And I think the best way to put that out is that the third Thursday meeting, which happened the next Thursday after the shooting tragedy, was at the library, the public library here on Draper Road, and there were 65 leaders from the nonprofit community and me. And all they wanted to talk about was how they could help the Virginia Tech community, and also realizing, thinking that this tragedy extended beyond Virginia Tech, because all of us lived in Blacksburg, and all the people, because students were killed, faculty member friends of mine were killed. And what they wanted was a window or a door. And so that was what our recommendation was, to create this center, which is now called VT Engage. And I stepped out of the department for 3 years to build that. But what I learned in that process was what I'm seeing happen here. I guess that's, we provided access to resources that, particularly students who are going to, and I said to them, I said, you're going to be at Virginia Tech longer than I was at almost any place in my Army career. You're going to be here for 4 or 5 years. I said, and you don't even know, you should know what your community is like. You should feel, most of you live off campus. You need to find out what Montgomery County is like. You need to find out what the New River Valley is like. And you need to be a part of that. And you need to invest in that. And if you do that, then you can live out the motto of UTPROSM, which is that I may serve, and there's a leadership component to that, right? So I wanted to help them become leaders in the community. And once I got sort of the center off the ground, the vice president, whom we actually met yesterday, was John Dooley, wanted me to stay, but I wanted to come back because I was seeing all these young kids coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and coming to school, and they'd seen 4 and 5 deployments, something that was unimaginable in my career, right? And I realized that we were not putting the resources of the university, which I mean the research and the teaching resources, to work in the way that we did in the 60s with creating women's studies, and the way we did in the aughts, with LGBTQ studies. And so we helped build a community that we called Veterans in Society, and now we have a Veterans Studies Association, and we have a Veterans Journal of Veterans Studies housed here at Virginia Tech. And that's another way, I guess, to, and what was really interesting is listening to my colleague here, Dr. Christie, speak and drawing from academic resources, right? Drawing from studies, right? And you have to it has to be empirical. It has to be quantifiable. It has to be verifiable. People aren't going to listen to it if it's just a story. So you have to combine the stories with the data. You have to. So what we're doing here is starting to build a resource. I guess that long story short, and I haven't said much the whole couple of days, but this, so I will stop after this, is to be a part of this group to try to build access to this part of the population that I mentioned yesterday that has so often been excluded, ignored, and the whole point of the fact, not invisible. I helped some colleagues in the community build a dialogue on race, and one of the community, because African Americans are 4% of the Montgomery County, and my colleague who asked me to help was the first African American elected to office, and she was a forklift operator. So she didn't even have a college degree, and she kept saying, Jim, we need to find a way to make us visible, because people don't even know who we are, what our troubles are. And one of the ways we did that was we went to all the boards of directors of all and we showed them on a draft all the different heads, and almost all of them were white, or maybe 1 out of 10 or 15 were black, and that was a way of highlighting exactly what you're doing with this. So the point is, this is good work. There are excellent leaders among you. You've already started all these powerful projects, and we are going to maybe be a window for all that work to a larger community that then can do sort of what VT Engage did for the New River Valley. This can do for the larger veteran community, particularly the women. So I guess that answers the question.
You can pass the phone to Ann, or the microphone to Ann. But one thing to say, Jim, is you are exactly right. You are a window, but you're the host of the house that's going to hold this information so that people have a place to go. And so thank you for sharing your home with us, and we look forward to the students have been phenomenal to work with.
And I also want to say thank you to this crew that's
Yes.
in here working today, because again, I'm privileged to have friends like my colleague Jason, who's not in here, who's doing the oral histories, and my colleague Joe and his crew. And you're right, I have access to tremendous resources, and learning to take advantage and reach out and build partnerships with them has been part of the learning experience. And clearly, you're an expert at this.
No.
But also, too, I think the thing is, to develop future leaders, you need those programs where they can integrate people that are learning. And I think, when I was in OSD, we often had families come to us whose children wanted to serve, but they had disabilities or didn't meet the physical qualifications. And there was one young man who was deaf, and he really wanted to serve in the military, and we kept saying, well, you really can't, because you have to be able to hear commands and everything else, and there was just you couldn't accommodate the person. But they still want to be able to know how to serve. What is the military life like? What are those issues? Where are those connections? And so by developing programs where they're going through the ROTC program here and then going off to civilian agencies, I think is an amazing model, because not only they have a cohort they can reach back to, there's connections both ways, so that as those military leaders are moving up through ranks and they see issues, they have other leaders in other government agencies they can reach back to and say, hey, have those conversations. And when you have those connections and conversations, it's huge. I was fortunate that I went to the Eisenhower School, which is one of the senior service colleges. And it's really the only senior service college that integrates civilian agencies and private sector organizations to really collaborate on how we build our U.S. national power. But if you don't have the building blocks back here at the university level, it's hard to build those leaders up here. I think this is an amazing model, and I just wish there were better ways of exporting this, so that, because I think it's phenomenal, because we have to goes back. We've come a long way, we have a long way to go. It's about building leaders, and a couple of you have said it's about leaders. And if we don't build those leaders and train them and educate them and have those conversations, we're not going to get to that next level of cultural change, and it shouldn't take us another 40 years to get to that next level.
Well, and so this morning when I was leaving the core building, and I haven't given it to you yet, but one of the instructors brought me a card, and he was looking for you, and unfortunately you had already headed over here. And he had met with cadets early this morning, and they gave him feedback on our session yesterday. And your experience as a helicopter pilot, as a veteran, what you shared with them was, he was so grateful for the opportunity that he gave me his card, and he said, well, we need veterans to tell their stories like this and to join groups like in our community. So he has a writing group that he's part of. It's a book club. And I will give you his information. And he just wants to figure out how to have other people from other types of career fields, different services, be part of the bigger community. And speaking out is hard. It's emotional. There's a lot that goes with that, both in preparation and in after the execution of what you've done. And so as we talk about culture and being a writer like you are and a leader, how do we address it with the cadets, for example, that you interacted with yesterday and today, because I saw that you talked to many, and how do we as veterans give back to the community, but then also gain from the hope and inspiration that these bright future leaders, and in some cases they're already leaders, are providing us?
Well, I think there's a reason they talk about the pen being mightier than the sword. And I feel like I was born a writer, and my life took me on this journey through military service to give me experiences to be able to write about. and then share them. And nothing gives me greater satisfaction than to be able to share experiences and kind of time travel through, you know, because there was a time when I was a cadet, and it puts me back in that headspace of what did I think about then. And I've been saying in therapy lately that I feel like my life in terms of a season it's been a very long, brutal, and bitter winter since 2010. That's when my brother died unexpectedly in his sleep. I had to have brain surgery for the pituitary tumor, and my marriage fell apart. And since then, I feel like the season in my life has just been a thick blanket of snow. It's not to say that there haven't been wonderful sunshine and beautiful rainbows along the way, but if I were to define that season, it's like it's been winter and blizzard after blizzard. And up until 2010, it had been spring and summer and spring and summer. I really hadn't had any setbacks. I hadn't had any real life challenges to speak of, which I think is the cadet. I mean, not that we don't have life challenges, but we have the resiliency to deal with them. That we don't even realize that we're getting down and getting back up. We don't even realize that. And so there's been this long, long, long winter. And we can help each other through that, but when it's winter, it's winter. And it's only until recently, my life kind of went into a blender over the summer where all the dominoes fell again with health, relationship, you name it, kind of everything fell apart. So I moved. I physically moved out of state and kind of like restarted myself. And it wasn't until October that I started getting this whiff of spring. And I can't describe it any other way than that. It was like a familiar thing. Like, you ever see a dog like lift its nose up and you're wondering what in the world is that guy smelling? Like, what is it? And what is it? Because we can't smell it, but they're smelling something. Well, it's like I landed in my condo and there I am unpacking boxes that I had had in storage for years from my divorce era, the week of my suicide attempt. It was like, I would think to myself, I'm gonna unpack this stack of boxes, but it was like opening up an Easter egg. I didn't know what was in that box, and I would pull that box down, and there's the helmet bag that after my suicide attempt, people packed up and put in, and I thought, holy smokes. And I unpacked that bag, and there were referrals to doctors in there. There were notes from my classmates in there. There was art that I had created that week, and it's like I'm doing this autopsy on myself that week. And I had so much compassion for myself. It's like, you know, when you're in life, like these cadets are in life, and when you're in life, it's like you can be in a pool that everybody's pissing in. It's yellow, but you don't realize that you're in a pool like that because you're going through life. And I now, having kind of decompressed myself and went through tons and tons of therapy, well over 10,000 hours of therapy, I look at these boxes and I had a whole different perspective for myself of like compassion and grace, and really felt the support and the resources that had helped me along the way. And now it's like, I don't know, I was saying this morning to the cadets that, you know, a mentor told me years ago that corn knows how to become corn.
I love this story.
It does not need any instructions or help from anybody. You plant a seed of corn and that thing is going to become corn. It's brilliantly intelligent. There's like not any more complicated than that. You plant a sunflower seed, you're not going to get an ear of corn. You're going to get a sunflower. So I feel with this spring kind of coming around the corner that I'm going to turn a corner, and I feel like I'm in a stage of life where I have no idea what seeds I planted 20 years ago. And I'm going to turn the corner, and it's going to be like the most surprising thing in the whole world. I don't know is it going to be sunflowers, corn, avocados? I have no freaking clue. And when I I think that's how life is. Like, the pilots that want to become pilots, I thought to myself, I didn't always want to become a pilot. It was like not even on my radar. But the path that led me to that was like, it's like so full of mystery and miracles that it's like, even the greatest writers of all time, I think that's what they try to accomplish, is to articulate that and illustrate it. And even the most brilliant writers fall short of it. And so, and culture, I mean, we have such a rich culture, and particularly in the service with the uniform, and wanting to keep that alive and transmit it and pass the legacy on. But it's like, we're all gonna become corn because the seeds were planted. Mm-hmm. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's just gonna happen. But we don't have any control over the timing or the season. It's like we put our nose into the air and we smell it or we don't. And thank God on the days that we smell it.
And she shared that story with our table this morning. I love that story. And I said, I'm going to remember the corn story.
It's more than a story.
Yeah.
Well, it might be an avocado or sunflower.
That might be that sunflower growing in the cornfield.
So I've been listening to these stories about these incredible programs like the Smith Center, like the Vet Center, and programs at the VA, programs at Walter Reed. And there is a plan to cut 80,000 positions from the VA. Let me say it once again, 80,000 positions. And so I think we have to prepare ourselves for the fact that many of these programs may not be able to survive, or they may be decimated. And I think it's important to look at a strategy to survive that, identify organizations that we can contribute to, processes that we can use to ensure the survival of these critical programs. And if you're not okay with 80,000 positions being cut, you can reach out to your elected officials, and that number is 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121, and let them know what you think about 80,000 positions being cut.
Can you say the number one more time?
202-224-3121.
But I think to the point too, how do we strengthen at the programs at the community level too? Because I think it's just not the federal agencies we need to be thinking about, it's our state agencies. And in many ways, I think the state veteran organizations are very powerful because they have a much better understanding of what those community needs might be and where the gaps are. And I think, you know, if things aren't going to be as strong at the federal level, how or you know, I think this is where we can make an impact working with the state level organizations, which truthfully are in many ways closer to the community needs and understand those community needs and can do a better job of getting people to work together, because I'm a big believer in public-private partnerships. I've never been a big believer that federal agencies should be responsible for everything, but they have to have smart policy and make sure that they're resourcing things at the right way. And then same thing at the state level. But it really needs to push down to those community levels. One of the things I think we're lacking though is what does a healthy military and veteran community look like? What are those things and those services they should have in place to make sure they are veteran friendly and military friendly? And I have seen that it's all over the place. You know, I look at states like Pennsylvania that offer some pretty good, strong programs. Maryland does some good things. I live in the district, and I would love to help the district be the role model, but I've reached out to them, and I'm waiting for the call back.
Well, and Virginia, I mean, we're here because of a state program.
And Virginia's a strong program.
Yeah, not so much about Virginia Tech, but I just wanted to say that, we are watching, I think, Dr. Christie's point about this incredible cut that's threatening. And that, of course, as she said in private conversations, I mean, about a third of the people being cut are going to be veterans across the government. So this is doing damage to veterans in terms of their care, and also damage to veterans in terms of their well-being across the country and their families' well-beings.
And damage to the employees that stay in place.
Right, and so
putting
this is
additional burden on them.
We were fortunate to be supported by a state-level organization, Virginia Humanities. Just recently, they sent out an email, and they talked about how 85% of their funding does not come from the federal government, so they were still going to continue to stand behind the kind of principles that they have advocated for, and they're not going to get rid of words like advocacy and diversity. And I just wanted to mention to your point is that there are, I was at a National Humanities Council conference, National Humanities Conference in Providence, Rhode Island, and I got approached because I was talking with the program officer from the National Endowment for the Humanities about the work we had been doing with veterans, and she had been helping to sponsor, which is how I had a chance to teach and how I met Anne Marie and one of those things. But the point that they were all interested, they too, as North Carolina, West Virginia, South Dakota, they were all interested in that because they thought that their states could and probably would continue and would like to find more ways to support veterans and their families. And so I believe that even if the federal government does cut, to your point, there probably will be support at state levels of humanities councils. And there is one at every state, and are in the Marianas and in Guam. They were all there. The other point is that I couldn't say it as well as Anne said, which I told her that she was in the class, she's one of the finest writers I've ever encountered in all the years of teaching that I've been doing. And the humanities are really important, and the arts. The humanities and the arts are really important as part of this. And the fact that we have all these organizations that are working together, whether they're dealing with trauma counseling, whether they're dealing with pregnancy issues, whether they're dealing with medical. The point I heard yesterday is that you can't separate the body and the mind, and the humanities and the arts help the body and mind express itself to a wider audience. And I think that we need to keep these kind of events. And it was just wonderful hearing about the hot glass work again. So I'll just say with that, I'll just say with that is that these are important. At a university that's particularly involved with the STEM side, it's still important to realize that the arts and humanities cannot be
STEAM.
It cannot be ignored, because they are the ways in which we keep our cultures alive. And with that, I'll turn it back to whoever.
And I'd like to actually STEAM-H, so we don't forget about the history and humanities, so we don't continue to repeat our mistakes.
Yes.
But to that point, I think it's when we think about the whole picture and the whole person and whole health and our whole communities, we really have to understand how all of these things fit together in that big puzzle. And if you're missing a piece of the puzzle, you don't get the full picture. And that full picture is so important. So making sure all these programs fit together for that whole picture, and that that the pieces are fitting together nicely is so important. And like you said, this is where we can have those discussions. We can be the influencers. We can help shape the next level of influencers with the education programs at the universities, and that's why I think things like this are just so important. It was such an honor to speak to that next generation of leaders. They're going to be the ones in 20 years making the policy decisions about me. So I want to make sure that we're preparing them well. So I think this is such an important opportunity.
Well, I learned a lot from them.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, a 12-year-old who came here that thought Virginia Tech was cool because of the great engineering program, after having breakfast with the cadets and interacting for 2 days with them, has decided not only is Virginia Tech a phenomenal academic institution, but it is a phenomenal leadership center. And it's centered around the Corps of Cadets, the civilian program that they have, and had actual cadets telling him, well, make sure that you do this, between being 12 years old and 18, so that when you apply, you have got these types of things on your resume. I'm like, my job as a parent, I mean, that's it. I mean, it is gospel.
What about the other 12-year-old though?
Well, she's more arts and not the engineering side, but she has her turn too. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah, we
gotta get her too.
We'll get her there.
But Annette's also there with us all the way, and so I think she has a strong association with arts and humanities. But that's the value, and without these discussions or images that cadets can look at, I wanted people to see this, and Alicia's here. She's Dr. Christie. She's the one that is our Uniting Us lead on this. Annette Poland is so generous to be with us and to provide guidance and support and insight. But we look at these pictures, and these are all women, but 8 women died in Vietnam. They came back, all the women came back from Vietnam. There are about 11,000 that served in Vietnam. And people would tell them, you weren't in Vietnam, women weren't there. Well, they were. But sometimes the arts and humanities give us the ability to be heard in a way that in our voices we can't. So I read a poem or I see a piece of art and I'm like, hold on a second, what about the person in the scrubs in the top left? Well, that's Vietnam. It looks like a medical provider and it really is timeless. But all these women died in combat. A lot of men have, also died in combat. And we document that. We tell their stories. And it's not exclusive to a single gender or race or service.
Well, we don't want their service to ever be forgotten because they paid the ultimate sacrifice. And we have to continue to honor those, our fallen veterans.
Right. And by doing that, the younger generation can see it and see it in a new light. And as they're leading, they have opportunities now to serve before they enter officially the service. And they're taking it.
Okay. I just want to say, I'm so grateful for Annette's mentorship in this work, and I was going to ask if you could provide the link to her Faces of the Fallen story in images. Thanks.
Very powerful. And so, Christina Helfrich Pulaski, you need the mic.
Oh yeah, she hasn't. We have to hear from you, please.
Yes. And here's the thing: all the different voices, all the different stories, matter. And so we're taking the content that was created these last couple days, and it's been recorded by professionals and phenomenal teams like Joe's here, and that's going to be available to people. You've been here. You've been at a lot of events and seen a lot of different things, met a lot of different people. What do you think moving forward?
Of women, like how, like
Cultural
historically,
Yeah, and
fit into the picture,
and just in general, as a leader.
Yeah. Well, this is why I like Uniting Us so much as an organization, because even though I've been to a lot of different programs, because you called me out of the blue in 2020 and literally saved my life because I was in a very dark place, and said, "Hey, can we have one of your
Just ship
pieces?
me this one piece
Yeah,
of
just
art.
would you
Trust
mind?
me.
Do you mind shipping it? You don't know me, but." And I was like, "Well, yeah, sure." I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? Because I went through a very dark time where if I didn't box up my stuff after I got out, I threw it away. And it was because when you're medically retired, you get all the benefits of being retired, but one day you're in, the next day you're out, and there's no party. You don't get thrown a retirement party. There's no, 30, 60, 90 days of terminal leave. That's just not how it's done. And so one day you're in and the next day it's like, and if you're, you know, not in a great relationship at the time and your caregiver, you know, isn't wonderful, then, you know, I went dark, 5-6 years, just dark. And it was art that I started doing, and I was never an artist, but I started doing, they called it at the time, you know, unconventional therapies. And that kind of started like I do something, it didn't have to do anything, but something inside me moved, and that hadn't moved for a very long time. And so, you know, it kind of got me out of bed. And that's not saying I don't have, you know, trip ups and, you know, end up being, you know, in the pit for a little bit. But, you know, I always have had United in Us since you called me as, you know, a backup. You know, you're always checking on me, making sure things are going okay. And
usually that's us calling to ask you to do something.
and I'm
always.
Well, and it's so wonderful because then you're useful, right? When you're volunteering and you're like, someone sees that I have value. And it's very easy when we isolate ourselves, and a lot of veterans, and I've talked to a lot of women veterans, we isolate ourselves on purpose. And we do that because, you know, we're not seeing any value in us, or, you know, we're listening to the bad things that have been told to us, or, you know, we didn't have, we compare our service to other women and be like, well, you know, I didn't fly a helicopter, so, you know, that's, you know, then what I did didn't matter for my 11 years. And I've just talked to woman after woman, and it's like, it's not a competition, right? And there's the good times and the bad times that art can, you know, we're not always concentrating on the bad times, right? Art gives us that, and I'm starting to be able to actually, because at one time I was like, can I ever do anything pretty? Can I ever make anything pretty? And you know, it gave me an opportunity to do that, and, you know, get out of bed. And I don't. These types of things, and it doesn't have to be Uniting Us, but any type of organization that, you know, gets you out of bed, and people who have been there know what I'm saying, that gives you a reason to literally live, you know, to literally do something. It's organizations like this. And to have our voices heard, like to have someone say, I'd like to do an interview with you, you know, a lot of women aren't ever asked about that. Like I did a Voices of Freedom one, and that was wonderful, but they only wanted to know about combat experiences. And I was like, well, there's so much more. Like, you know, I was only deployed twice out of my 11 years. So we're talking about the majority of the years where I wasn't. And there's a story there too. And we're just not being asked. And
Joe, we can come back.
a lot of things that I have learned is we have to stop waiting to be asked, right? We have to start finding our people who we can collaborate with, and just do it ourselves. You know, and just stop waiting. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can tell I was going through a hard time. This was during my separation and divorce. But it is a collage from The World of Beretta. I found a coffee table book called The World of Beretta, got it for $1. And when I opened it, there was the schematics for the M9, you know, Beretta. And I was like, oh, that's what we carried. I'm like, I was like, I had no idea it was a Beretta because I'm not a gun person, you know. But, you know, we all, well, as you get to a certain level, you get one. And so I was like, I had an idea. And so I used the whole entirety of the book to make that. So the
self-portrait.
This is the self-portrait of what I was going through. So my hair are the long guns, and I never knew Beretta had long guns, right? So, and like even the face, those are from pages, you know, from the book. So, so now I will do some, I'm working on my art therapy certification online. It's just a certificate. It's not, you know, anything yet, but so that I can, when I'm going to conferences and speaking with my writing partner, who I just illustrated her book, you know, I can do breakout sessions in art therapy to maybe inspire, because the first thing I always get is I'm not an artist. I don't want to do any type of things, you know, and I'm like, you know, just do something that finds the thing that moves something inside of you, and that's art. And I have so many women who do these amazing works of art, and I'm like, you're an artist, and they're like, nah, it's just a hobby, you know. And I was just like, no, it's not. That's amazing, and I think we just need to be told that, and
be forced to admit it.
Well, and we got to say, you know, if I walk into, because I'm having the problem right now, walking into my VA and I'm not seeing myself represented. I'm not seeing women represented, right? And I'm like, all the pictures are of flags or of men in boots or of guns and things like that. And I think we need to get more female artwork into the VAs, but not just that. Each service has an art museum. Like the Army has an art museum. The Marines do too. And you know, I want to, you know, ask them, in your permanent collection, what percentage of art is made by, you know, women? And it's like, and it's the permanent collections that matter, not when they pull in things, you know, just for Women's History Month or, you know, one of that. And because permanent collections mean they spent money on it, right? And money is where it matters. And, you know, I've been answered to where it's like, because I'm like, there's 19% of women. Well, I know for the Army. So I'm like, so you should have at least 19% of your permanent collection should be by women artists. And they're like, well, that isn't how it works. We don't use quotas. I was like, well, that's what the military, that's how it works in the military. Everything's a quota. Everything is a percentage. You know, this is not hard. There are amazing female artists doing spoken word, doing written word, doing art in all different fashions and forms. And it would be very easy to, you know, start buying up these works, you know, and because it helps, you know, it helps. It helps.
It does.
You're seen and you're recognized. And, you know,
it's part of that cultural change that needs to happen too.
Absolutely.
And thinking about making sure that that the artwork is properly representative of the population that they're serving.
Yes.
And maybe not solely about quotas, but also too, is the artwork that we have, is it representing the service members that we do have, to make sure that everyone has a voice.
So here's something interesting. Think about this. The Smithsonian American History art collection is managed by a man that is not a veteran, but the British Embassy introduced him to Uniting Us, because the British Embassy are very good friends, right?
Right.
So his name is Frank. Frank has said, bring your artists to the Smithsonian, and I'm going to take you into our collections, private collections, and people will be able to see things that are will blow their mind. And I asked him, does it include women pictures, or, you know, does the art include a reference to women, and are there women that you have in your private collection? And he is like, let me get back to you on that. But he said, I will be prepared when your group comes. So it has to start with Smithsonian's and other locations, because
those civilian
grassroots
institutions.
programs like Ryan Hinley's at the DC Vet Center, he changed the art, all of the art out in the Vet Center.
Right.
Modernized the view of what was shown and representative.
We have this piece too, actually. So Christina gave us a beautiful print of this piece, which is currently at the Center for Women Veterans at Waco. But Christina, thank you. So, I mean, this is a breathtaking piece.
And this is why programs at Virginia Tech are so important, to educate our future government leaders about these stories and encourage their diverse thinking, and open their eyes up, because we can't get where we need to go without our civilian organizations and our civilian institutions, and making sure organizations like the Smithsonian, oh, well, right, nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever challenged me. Just like you said, nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever asked them. Nobody ever challenged their thinking. And if we don't gracefully challenge people's thoughts and help them expand their view, then that's on us.
Right.
Okay, and I think that's one of the things. I was at a luncheon last week, and we had General Jamie Shawley speak, and one of the things I walked away with is that control what you can, influence what you can. Okay, well, control what you can, influence what you can't. Okay, so if we don't ask the questions and ask the whys, I was always the one, but why? But why? And it helped influence the change because I was always asking, but why? Well, let's figure this out. Let's see if that's right.
Right.
You know, I shared the story. I've shared this with you. I had 282nd Airborne instructors, and you know, I asked, well, why shouldn't women be able to serve in every position? Well, they probably can't compete with us. Well, why? Yes, they can. Let's do the two-mile run. And I was able to beat them both. They gave me their berets. I gave their berets back graciously at graduation for Balashevas Regal, but their leadership wrote a really nice letter about history taking place that day.
Right.
And to me, supporting and pushing cultural change, I could control that moment by challenging their thinking and getting advocates to help support change.
Right.
And doing it one or two people at a time. When we look at organizational change, we have to kind of look at the people that are going to be in your court and use them as your influencers. And then the people that are kind of on the fence, bring them in by challenging their thinking and show them that this is okay. There's always going to be the naysayers. They're never going to go away. There's always going to be a few people out there. And I've led big program changes. There's always that third back there. Don't worry about them. Worry about the people that you can influence, the people you can bring along, and you can then push that change.
And the people that are growing towards
yes.
the future.
Yes, yes.
And that's, I mean, Jim, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. In my opinion, and I'm just going to go up to this, the success of the last 2 years of working with you is having a slide like this that we can say, well, hold on, is that date right? Because the policy was signed on this, but it wasn't until 2 years later that it actually happened. And we heard people saying that. And then the cadets look at it and go, what the heck? You know, look at the Morse code in the background of this. And that was a Virginia Tech English student that did the design on this chart. And she's going to continue to do work, graphic arts work with Uniting Us. And she said, I didn't know that women couldn't always serve. And she's not connected to ROTC, but a brilliant student and a future leader. And so this has opened my eyes. Virginia Humanities, I didn't really think they'd pick us because we're not a mainstream topic. But with the core behind us, with Virginia Tech, we're here and we're not going away. So thank you so much.
I did want to say as well, Liz Estabrooks, the previous moderator, she has a book coming out on the 18th. I don't know if it was mentioned previously, but the book is called, so Liz's book is called Broken in the Stronger Places, From Resilience to Resourcefulness, and that comes out March 18th.
Yes.
And Christina, could you just share how people can connect with your artwork, like your website or?
Yes, something that I worked on when I got into a dark place was I created a website called woundednotworthless.com, and it was for women veteran artists of all spectrums. Because I've had poets who said, oh, I can't be on that because I'm not an artist, and be like, girl, you are an artist, and it's amazing. And so, I mean, I don't have, I always search out, and I give my card and be like, get back with me. What Wounded Not Worthless does is I will help you write an artist statement, a bio. I will show you where to go to put, how to, if you have a piece of art, submit it, do a call for entry to get it in an exhibition or an exhibit. And I think maybe I have 7 right now. And then when we get donations or something like that, I've had some that be like, I can't do something this month because I can't make rent. So we're able to then, even though it's not a 501c, because that's impossible for my brain to wrap around how to do it, and I don't know how you do it, Emery. But but we still have funds that are going to provide for, like, do art because I'm going to cover your rent this month.
And you've helped people, you've done exhibits. So when I saw Christina's art, I was like, and she had, it was a U.S. flag, burned the names in of the women at that point that had been killed in the War on Terror.
Right.
And I only saw a picture of it, but we also saw this Wounded Not Worthless program that she had. And I mean, it was a ringer. It was like, and she actually shared a piece of art an original piece of art that's got a value higher than I should be carrying, by the way.
Well, art
and
is
has
subjective, so
continued.
you can make your art worth anything.
No, that's not true. There is that value is for real. But that she was already doing something. Uniting Us isn't about doing everything. We want to bring other organizations, people, communities in, and just bring people together in a healthy way that is safe and is accepting, and we can share ideas and respect each other's
Absolutely.
opinions and experiences.
Right. And if anyone out there, anyone who is a female artist, you can be any way connected to the military. You know, my Gmail is really easy, woundednotworthless@gmail.com, and that'll get straight to me.
We'll put that up on the page.
Yeah, but thank you again, Anne-Marie, for giving a voice to the voiceless, because a lot of us do it. You know, a great amount of therapy to be able to be here today. You know, and it's very important also to recognize my mom and my grandmother, if I had a minute.
Yeah,
Just
and their pictures are.
They are. My grandmother's to the far right. She's 99 next month, and then my mom is 78, and she served in the Army Nurse Corps during Vietnam, and I think I said 1969, 1971. And their stories, I'm like, the first thing my mom told me about her being in the Army was, I was never going to tell my children that I served, because that's how horrible people were to anybody in a uniform.
Right.
At that time, and that's fine. I mean, I totally get it. You know, people didn't know where to put the thing, and we were an easy, symbol of the establishment that they wanted to break down. And I get it as a historian, but to have your mom say that to you, it's like everybody's, all women are somebody's mom, somebody's sister, somebody's grandmother. And it wasn't until Anne-Marie said, that's really cool that you have 3 generations of women.
I didn't know. Christina's like, well, my mom served in the Vietnam era. I was like, that is phenomenal. So 2 generations of women. And then she says, well, my grandmother in 1944, and I'm like, 3-generational family of women in service, right? And so they have been with us at every event. I'm so sad that they weren't. Your mother and your grandmother were not able to make it, but they're here with us, and their stories are part of this.
Right, and they need to be said because we're losing our World War II veterans.
Could I just say, it's not me, but because we're almost out of time.
Yes.
Based on another one of the students who was in my classes is just publishing a book. She was a nurse in Vietnam. She already published one book. It's called Women Under Fire: Abuse in the Military. And the second one coming out is called War. It's coming out, well, actually, today's the 7th, right?
Yes.
Came out yesterday, March the 6th. I wrote a blurb for it. Warrior Nurse, PTSD and Healing. And the first one was Women Under Fire. Her name is Sarah Blum. She's in her 80s, and she's amazing. She was, you remember, amazing. So, 2 books that really validate and highlight everything that you've just said. And other people have said about service, women's service in Vietnam.
Awesome.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we have to close up.
Yes, we need to close up. And just real quick, I want to recognize Jason, who just stepped in. Dr. Higgins, thank you so much for the support of your students and yours, and helping us document through interviews and interactions. And if you're looking for someone that can interview anyone and have a connection with them immediately, it's him, and he's teaching the leaders here at Virginia Tech, the student body, to do the same. And so thank you so much for the efforts. And you just recently published a book, I think. So we'll put his book information as well on the site. So Joe, a credit to your folks. You stayed late. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Can we also have a round of applause for Anne Marie?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And a big hug.
Thanks, Ryan. All right.
It's a close?
It's a close. That's a wrap.